Chapter 909. There was a saying in the heavenly Yuan Empire that could be translated as, the mouth moves, the ears move. On the one hand, it meant that everything that happens is connected. On the other hand, it meant that even the walls have ears. On the other hand, it meant that, speak of the devil and he will appear. Liang Lu's current situation wasn't just that his mouth and ears moved, but that his entire body moved. This was an exaggeration, but his soul was definitely trembling right now. Just as he was getting carried away, the person in charge of the review had already led his subordinates over in a grandiose manner. It had to be said that Liang Lu's earlier analysis was rather accurate. The most eye-catching person in the group was undoubtedly the sturdy giant at the front. It was Shi Yuan, a third-rank noble known as Vicious. He was half a head taller than the 3-meter-tall Colonel Xingzhan, and had practically come in from the top of the passageway. There was no need to mention his ferocious appearance. Even inside the base, he wore a layer of metal armor that extended to his face and seemed to fuse with his flesh. At this moment, a cold light pulsated as he breathed. From his appearance, he wasn't just a vicious person, he was practically a wolf in sheep's clothing. In comparison, Chang Yihui was a third-rank noble who was much more low-key. Although he walked side by side with Sir Shi Yuan, his height only reached Sir Shi Yuan's waist. Perhaps the contrast was too obvious, but he seemed thinner than a normal person. His face was long and narrow, and his eyes were small. However, Liang Lu was even more afraid of this person. It wasn't just because Sir Chang Yihui was the second in command of the logistics department, and was in charge of him. It was also because this person's surname was Chang Yi. Chang Yi was a compound surname, and was the surname of great sovereign Chang Yishuan, the one with the greatest military achievements at the founding of the empire. In the heavenly Yuan Empire, great sovereign Chang Yishuan was also known as the Devil Buster Great Sovereign. Putting aside his great achievements before and after the founding of the nation, in the early days of the era of Sin, during the Dark Age after the fall of the Master of Zhanhe, he dragged his heavily injured body and swept across the Hangguang Galaxy in the most violent and poisonous environment. He opened up the most basic living space for the survivors who were on the verge of extinction. In the hundreds of years that followed, he presided over the central area and cut off all the dark hands of the heavenly kingdoms, until he ran out of oil and returned to silence. Even after his death, the inner universe he opened up also transformed into a permanent plane, carrying the most important, jade crystal array, of the empire. In the light concealment galaxy, it lit up the flames of survival for the heavenly abyss survivors. The jade of the jade crystal array came from this. It could be said that it was precisely because of great sovereign Chang Yishuan's existence that the heavenly Yuan Empire had been able to survive through the darkest period of turmoil and the most torturous period of talent shortage. Great sovereign Chang Yishuan had played a major role in the heavenly Yuan Empire's survival until now. Thus, the surname, Chang Yi, had the same status as the imperial Zhan clan. In the base, people called Sir Chang Yihui by his name and not his surname to show respect. The current Chang Yihui was a third-class knight. Of course, he didn't have his ancestors' Devil Buster ability, but as long as the surname, Chang Yi, was in front of him, it had a natural intimidating power for a young soldier like Liang Lu. Not to mention that Chang Yihui was also in charge of the Dark Com organization. He presided over the treatment and identification of the Sin poison infection. Zhan Zhao's fate today would most likely depend on Chang Yihui's final judgment. At this time, Liang Lu just wanted to lick back the words he spat out earlier. But the reality was that he couldn't do anything. He could only stand together with Luo Nan. He straightened his body, looked straight ahead, and assumed the most standard posture of a soldier. He waited for the reprimand that could come at any time, as well as the follow-up orders. And the reality was that Liang Lu had made the same mistake as Zhan Zhao. He had added too much drama to his mind. These big shots of the base had come over in groups. They absolutely didn't come to reprimand a few pawns. They came for Sir Shi Yuan, who had been called out by name. There was no follow-up after Liang Lu and Luo Nan's words of mockery. The group of people directly passed by Liang Lu and Luo Nan's position and arrived before the area being protected and surveyed by the Dark Com organization. Colonel Xingzhan, who was a bit behind the two knights, couldn't escape the fate of being a busy person even at this time. He pointed at the air with his finger as he walked. He was most likely dealing with other matters. He didn't even turn his eyes in their direction. Luo Nan and Liang Lu watched helplessly as the group of big shots passed by and were treated as air. Luo Nan and Liang Lu, especially Liang Lu, didn't dare to move an inch until Lu Andy, who was part of the entourage, gave them a look that said, "Follow me." Only then did Luo Nan and Liang Lu quietly turn around and follow the group with their hearts in suspense. At this time, Zhang Xiao was unable to maintain his casual posture. He stood ramrod straight like Liang Lu and Luo Nan, separated by the isolated area. His posture did not change even though the two had been freed from their restraints. Zhang Xiao was one of the mid-level officers of the base, so he had the qualifications to make the big shots look at him in the eye. But his performance just now had more or less caused people to dislike him. Sir Shi Yuan didn't pay attention to him. He just lowered his head and conversed with Sir Chang Yihui. The cold and sinister metal plate on the side of his face faintly warped along with his facial movements. You guys aren't busy enough with logistics. You guys feel sorry for yourselves. You guys do counseling. You guys even have time for psychological treatment. Over at my place, a machine cannon can solve all your problems. If you have the strength to survive, then you can toss and turn after the war. Let alone Zhang Xiao, who was right in front, even Liang Lu, who had just blended into the group, straightened his body. His fair face flushed red once more. As for Luo Nan, he wasn't that sensitive. Or perhaps it could be said that this wasn't the area he was sensitive to. While Zhang Xiao and Liang Lu were feeling ashamed because of Sir Shi Yuan's evaluation, Luo Nan was a bit distracted. The direct reason for his distracted state was because he had followed the group closer to the isolated area where the incident had taken place. As he got closer, some minute details began to give him a faintly discernible stimulation. Luo Nan furrowed his brows. He was separated by layers upon layers of people in front of him, especially by Sir Shi Yuan's broad torso. Luo Nan's gaze and telepathic thoughts were cast in synchrony at the specific location where he had personally cut up. The big shots in the front row were in a different state. Chang Yihui didn't have any expression toward Shi Yuan's ridicule. He just nodded slightly in response. He opened his mouth to speak in the next moment, directly pulling back to the main topic, seize the moment. Let's review the situation. The officer of the Dark Calm administration, who was in charge of handling the scene, responded and stood up to report the situation. They, the members of the mission, all possessed specialized knowledge in this field. They also possessed rich experience in handling situations. How to report, how to find the key points, how to make suggestions, all of these had established procedures. It could be said that they were extremely familiar with it and flowed smoothly without any stumbling. The two knights just listened quietly most of the time. They would occasionally ask a question, and no matter what they heard, their faces didn't change in the slightest. Luo Nan was also within the group listening attentively. Since the reporting personnel of the Dark Calm administration spoke quite a bit of specialized vocabulary, coupled with the problem of the chaos-style translation, Luo Nan could only listen to the general logic. He lacked the ability to comprehend the more practical and crucial data. Because of this, Luo Nan heard half of the report. Luo Nan clearly understood the basic conclusion that Officer Xiao suffered the backlash of the new, Time Fortress structure. Officer Xiao was fully exposed in the twisted and evil environment. Officer Xiao was extremely close to the location of the incident. There was a high probability that he was directly responsible for the light pollution this time. Moreover, similar incidents might occur in the future. Luo Nan no longer bothered to understand the dry and dull data. His mind was completely focused on sensing the target area. As he poured his mind into it, a certain sense of disharmony continued to proliferate and magnify in his space of consciousness, even though he didn't have the amplification of the standard array and lacked the assistance of the equipment. Luo Nan's brows furrowed tighter and tighter. It seemed like before, Luo Nan's emotions and thoughts churned, and his palms suddenly felt pain. He instinctively lowered his head to look and saw that the syncopator, which he had been studying and fiddling with since the beginning of the journey back, had triggered the activation command for some unknown reason. The syncopator had transformed from a chrysalis egg state into a mechanical ant. The sharp edges of the syncopator cut and stabbed fiercely into the tender flesh of Luo Nan's palm. Luo Nan's character in the game scene had basically restored his true cultivation. His fleshly body still had a bit of a foundation. His skin wasn't broken, only a short white scar was left behind. Right now, his flesh was slowly recovering to its normal color. But it was this scar that cut away the slight hesitation that arose in Luo Nan's heart due to his judgment. It allowed him to draw a definite conclusion: this isn't right. It's wrong. Luo Nan's thoughts were practically synchronized. Behind the two knights, Shi Yuan and Chang Yihui, was the broad-shouldered officer Sheng Zhan. He used the shortest and most direct words to negate the overall results of the reporting officers of the Dark Calm administration. This instantly drew the focus of practically everyone's gazes. If Luo Nan was an ordinary officer, Sheng Zhan's response would undoubtedly be overstepping his authority and disregarding his superiors. But the problem lay in the fact that he had another identity in addition to his rank as an officer in the military. He was a master in both configuration and technique deployment. He could be promoted to the position of a master. In the Heavenly Yuan Empire, this was an illustrious position comparable to that of a second-class Star Lord. In the military, academic status would certainly give way to military rank. But in a domain like sinful poison, which required profound space-time configuration theory and technical support, even the highest officer of the relay station, Sir Yen Chi-Chu, would have to listen to Officer Sheng Zhan's opinion with an open mind. Needless to say, whether it was Chang Yihui or Shi Yuan, they actually had a bit of tacit understanding and preparation in their hearts. Chang Yihui's face remained calm and collected. He just leaned slightly to the side and spoke with a relatively gentle tone: "If you have any opinions, Officer Sheng Zhan can raise them." Sheng Zhan did not speak immediately. Instead, he used his thick fingers to light up one projection area after another in the air. It was like a demonstration board in a classroom. Looking at it, it was filled with densely packed formulas, numbers, and extremely complicated diagrams and sections. More than half of the people who came over were Sir Shi Yuan's guards. They were used to fighting on the battlefield and rolling on the front line. The moment they saw the cold structure of numbers, they felt like they had been kicked back to the dark time before the general education exam. They were panicking, breathless, and dizzy. They did not feel good at all. Only a few people, such as Luanda, showed great interest in these display boards. More people were looking at each other. Was this master's demeanor going to give a long speech? In this slight restlessness, Sheng Zhan lit up the final projection. It was surprisingly refreshing. It was just a standard timer interface. The precision was relatively high, and it could be accurate to 10,000ths of the basic time. Sheng Zhan confirmed the time through this interface: 2,136 seconds. As soon as his voice fell, a dazzling red light and an alarm came at the same time. Chapter 910. Nefarious poison contamination, low intensity. Many people didn't even need to look at the display to roughly guess the meaning of the alarm. The overall atmosphere of the team fluctuated slightly. Some people whispered to each other, but overall, it was not as chaotic as when Colonel Sheng Zhan arranged the teaching display board. After all, everyone was already used to it. In the frontline bases that were engulfed in the flames of war and people were dying all the time, how could they expect the air to be clean and dust-free? Luo Nan was the most unaccustomed to this. According to the drill manual he had learned, he should be dealing with it now. However, no one moved at all, including the professionals from the Ming establishment. Everybody's eyes were wandering on the teaching board and the faces of the big shots, trying to find the key to the current situation. It must be said that Luo Nan already had a grasp of the situation and judgment in his mind. His understanding of the situation had already surpassed the vast majority of people present. Unfortunately, he was limited by his pitiful mathematical knowledge. Of course, there was a gap in the overall knowledge structure. Looking at these display boards was like reading a book from heaven. Even the most blunt inference method could not find any logical clues from them. For a moment, he was extremely vexed. On the other hand, Liang Lu, who was next to Luo Nan, was awakened from his stupefied state by this wave of alarm. He was barely able to shake off the shame of receiving a bad evaluation. He was unable to calm his heart and observe the display board for the time being. In his days, he only received the most stimulating information from the outside world. He even subconsciously looked for Luo Nan to converse. This alarm sounds familiar, Luo Nan grunted softly. His gaze struggled free from the display board. He shifted his gaze along with Liang Lu to point at the alarm device. It was a piece of detection equipment placed beside the isolated area by the Netherworld Agency. Its working principle was the same as the detection module on the specialized maintenance vehicle, and the basic conclusion it obtained at this moment didn't seem to be any different. Really? Liang Lu was horrified. This area had clearly already been handled by him and Luo Nan. However, the warning this time was so similar that it was as if they had gone back in time. Didn't that mean that their previous work didn't work? Liang Lu's little heart skipped a beat. He turned his head to look at Luo Nan, but his scalp went numb before he could make eye contact with Luo Nan. He subconsciously turned his head, and he just so happened to meet Cheng Zhan's large, bloodshot eyes. Liang Lu's heart was flustered, and his reaction was also wooden. Fortunately, Cheng Zhan only swept a glance over him, and Liang Lu didn't even catch the focus of his gaze. Then, Cheng Zhan said, "It's still the worker bee area 3321 to 3328, the low permeability type. The standard operation is divided into 17-05. The log shows that the last operation of Central Dimension 2 Patrol is in line with the program. The so-called Central Yenwei Patrol 2 was the abbreviation for the Central Pipeline and Safety Partition Area Extension Department Maintenance Post Patrol 2. In other words, it referred to the two people, Liang Lu and Luo Nan. In Cheng Zhan's mouth, the work log that Liang Lu had painstakingly organized was skipped over by this sentence. As for the more detailed part, it would probably occupy an inconspicuous corner of the complex data model that was currently ascending and descending. It might even be just one of the series of basic data. Even so, Liang Lu was very satisfied. No matter how small the positive feedback was, it was still positive. The impact of the negative reviews from before quietly dissipated a little. Luo Nan, who was next to him, could hear Luo Nan clearly. However, Luo Nan didn't pay too much attention to Liang Lu's mental state. He just stared blankly as he looked at the dense arrangement of teaching boards at the front of the line. He looked at the flashing and refreshing formulas, numbers, and graphics. Even if he could understand them, not 1 out of 100 could understand them. Liang Lu's whisper entered his ear. That person finally began to collect his mind and study this series of highly difficult mathematical models. He soon discovered an extraordinary situation. It's constantly refreshing. It wasn't just Liang Lu. Some other people who could vaguely make out what was going on found out one after another that the teaching exhibition board, which was already extremely complicated to begin with, was constantly being refreshed. Every piece of content was being refreshed at a different frequency. Each model seemed to be performing real-time calculations to mark out a certain type of rule changes. At this time, one could guess that there was certainly some sort of hidden yet unrevealed linkage logic between each board. The vast majority of people had already given up upon realizing this point. There were also some professionals who were extremely interested in this. They didn't want to give up, and they cast their gazes one after another toward Cheng Zhan, who had lit up these teaching boards. They hoped that this person possessed a deep foundation in theory. He also possessed the demeanor of a master who had rich experience in teaching. He could dispel their doubts. They were destined to be disappointed. Obviously, Cheng Zhan didn't think that the current environment was the kind of classroom where he could explain the profound in simple terms. He didn't have the intention of giving a long lecture, including this series of demonstrations. He didn't expect most people to understand. It was enough as long as the two knights who had decision-making power could understand. The two knights had indeed understood the key information. Shi Yuan's gaze lingered on the most conspicuous timing interface in the center. He briefly summarized, periodic changes. Sheng Zhan confirmed, even if we deal with it now, it will appear again in 2 to 3 minutes. It should be the multiple elemental linkage of the new spacetime fortress architecture. Of course, it also includes the increase and decrease of entropy within this near-closed system. Chang Yihui thought a little more and immediately asked, where does this rhythm of evolution come from? The rules of the evil environment shouldn't reflect obvious regularity. Here. Sheng Zhan's finger pointed at the projection area on the left of the timer interface. The formula and numbers displayed on this projection did not seem much different from the other display boards. However, in the eyes of those who knew the ropes, it represented a very special meaning. The vast majority of the people in the surroundings could not understand it. Those who could understand it had more or less a change in expression. Luo Nan heard Liang Lu's extremely low inhalation of air between his lips and teeth before it was forcefully cut off. Shi Yuan and Chang Yihui's expressions were also very serious. Chang Yihui's duty was the most suitable to express his position. He didn't delay and spoke a few seconds later, I'll immediately report the relevant situation to Sir Tang. Given the current situation, I believe that everyone should meet to exchange opinions and respond to the following problems in a timely manner. The metal plate on Shi Yuan's cheek seemed to have frozen into his flesh. He didn't speak any further. He just nodded silently. Sheng Zhan clenched his fist after the two knights reached a consensus. The densely packed display boards directly returned to nothingness, severing the last hope of certain people to listen to the lecture. Sheng Zhan spoke to Chang Yihui at this time, we might need to make some major adjustments in the maintenance and repair work. Pull out some people. Chang Yihui declined to comment. He just said, we'll talk after we meet. Then he turned around and left with quick steps. The troops behind him split apart, forming a passageway for the few big shots to leave. A personal guard like Lu Andy naturally had to leave with Shi Yuan. Before he left, he even gestured to Liang Lu, Luo Nan, and Zhan Xiao, who had inexplicably gone from being the center of attention to being ignored. It could be considered a farewell. However, Luo Nan was able to see that a layer of haze had faintly accumulated on the peak of this mature and steady officer's brows. Even his candid smile was unable to conceal it. Soon, the two knights and their entourage left without a trace. Luo Nan turned around and looked at the contaminated area that was beginning to be treated. So far, he could be considered to have come into close contact with the evil and poisonous environment. He felt the chaotic yet moving towards chaos, the internal irritation yet no obvious internal friction. But was he infected by Liang Lu with this inexplicable sense of familiarity? And at this time, Luo Nan heard Liang Lu murmur, this is really bad. Luo Nan nodded, it really is bad. Liang Lu was startled. He raised his head to look at Luo Nan, you know that model. Do you learn it in the general level? If it's the one that Officer Sheng Zhan was referring to, then no. Luo Nan denied it. He really didn't know what the model was, but he followed his own logic in deducing forward. He picked out the details bit by bit, cross-verified them, and eliminated the correct options. The final remaining link, no matter how absurd it seemed in common sense, was definitely problematic. After experiencing the evil and poisonous environment up close, Luo Nan was able to deduce it from a more fundamental configuration theory. He had the confidence to conclude that he had executed the entire process from the discovery of the contaminated area to the cutting process. His judgment was accurate, and there were no mistakes at all. There were no problems with the link he led. Then the problem was not with the part that belonged to him. Yes, Luo Nan was referring to the blessing of cleaning and patching after the cutting process was completed. The problem was the jade crystal array. Liang Lu was unable to grasp Luo Nan's reasoning for a time, but he didn't have the mood to delve into it. In reality, he just had a deep impression of the data model of the jade crystal array. He forcefully guessed it from the words and actions of Officer Sheng Zhan and the others. His train of thought was far from being clear. His train of thought was simply cut off by Luo Nan's interruption. He circled back, what's going on? Is it a malfunction, or? It's the contamination. The one who spoke was Zhang Xiao. And right now, he was surrounded by the members of the Jingming agency. He crossed the quarantine area and walked to the vicinity of Luo Nan and Liang Lu. Perhaps it was the opposite of what happened when things reached an extreme. This member of the imperial family had suffered from a bad evaluation and neglect within a short few minutes. Not only did he not collapse, but he seemed to have calmed down quite a bit. Of course, this didn't mean that he was free. He still had to go to the relevant department to undergo a series of tests and inquiries. The surrounding personnel were simply monitoring and escorting him. Zhang Zhao's footsteps didn't stop. He didn't even turn his head when he spoke his second sentence. I only understood what that fellow did after Officer Xing pointed it out. He twisted the sewage pipe and the drinking water pipe together. Zhang Zhao's analogy wasn't accurate, but it was helpful in understanding. Liang Lu, who was originally confused, vaguely understood. He was even more astonished. Does he want to be court-martialed with this godly operation? I don't know if he'll be court-martialed or not, but everyone knows that the next few days are bound to be terrible. Chapter 9-11. At least one of Liang Lu, Luo Nan, and Zhang Zhao's mouths had been blessed. With the prediction of the situation still ringing in their ears, after a brief meeting, the base's military resolution team announced that the relay station was executing a Level 2 pollution response and entering a state of emergency. In accordance with the standard of falling into the medium-level evil poison contamination area, the various drill rules and regulations were strictly implemented. Don't be fooled by the word strict hanging on the announcement. From Luo Nan's perspective, the drill rules and regulations he had learned some time ago would have to be abolished by at least half if they were to be implemented according to the new rules. The feeling it gave people was that of a dust-free electronic workshop, where every cubic meter of air contained specks of dust, had a sudden change in style. It had become a steel mill with surging heat waves and flowing molten iron. At the same time, the worker bees within the 3 hives cancelled all rest and rearranged their positions. They were required to familiarize themselves with their new jobs in the shortest amount of time possible and enter a state of mind. The so-called rearrangement was done in accordance with Xing Zhan's suggestion to Chang Yihui, substantially reduce the number of people in charge of daily maintenance at the base and fill them up with direct production positions. The direct result of this adjustment was that all the maintenance soldiers became the busiest group of people in the logistics department in a single leap. There was no one else. While their former colleagues were scrambling to adapt to their new production positions, Liang Lu and Luo Nan, who remained in their original positions, needed to be in charge of a maintenance area several times larger than before. For example, the previous, 2nd Patrol Team for the maintenance of the Central Pipeline and Safety Partition Area Extension had now become the Maintenance Team for the Global Pipeline Extension Area. It had been merged with 2 other personnel of the same post into a large team, and it was led by a senior lieutenant. However, the area of responsibility had increased by more than 10 times. Under these circumstances, if they were to strictly follow the routine drill rules and carry out maintenance tasks, they would need to chop 2 people into 10 pieces, 20 pieces, and then blow a mouthful of immortal energy to form a clone. Only then would they be able to meet the basic requirements. Under the pressure of reality, they were bound to give up some things. Full Yanwei Division 2 has discovered a low pollution area. Coordinates. Don't waste time. Just stare at the pipelines, equipment, and maintenance machines. Don't pay attention to anything else. Even if the living evil poison reaches the tip of your nose, pretend you don't see it as long as it doesn't eat you. Roger that. Liang Lu hung up the call in a straightforward and efficient manner. He curled his lips and indicated for Luo Nan to drive the specialized maintenance vehicle. The vehicle ran straight through the middle of the area labeled as low-intensity pollution. As for the alarms that were still flashing incessantly, Seiji only needed to punch them with his fist. No, he needed to adjust the alarm level and the alarm would stop flashing. Look, on the command deck of the Beehive, the stress of dispatching over the past 2 days has fried a lot of people's brains. The odds of us running into gibberish have significantly increased, too. Luo Nan's eyebrows unconsciously twitched twice as the specialized maintenance vehicle buzzed through the polluted area as they spoke. The intricate and detailed mental senses interweaved with the deep impression of the drill manual's requirements. This was more or less a type of torture for a patient with mild obsessive-compulsive disorder. Liang Lu mentally prepared him with the tone of an experienced person. Now, don't think of the base as a base. You can close your eyes and imagine a military stronghold that was built before the world of sin and was later abandoned. Now it is completely abandoned. Only mutant species that grew up in the evil environment will occasionally pass by. That's basically what a moderately polluted area means. What we're doing now, you can just treat it as field work. Even the logistics personnel will occasionally have the opportunity to go out into the field. This is a rehearsal ahead of time. Luo Nan laughed, and Liang Lu laughed as well. He punched the control panel of the vehicle again. Who would have thought that a problem would occur with the jade crystal array? It's all that self-righteous, wicked thing's fault. Luo Nan, who was given the title of Wicked Thing, had a smile that collapsed a bit. Luckily, Liang Lu didn't notice. He just sighed. Honestly speaking, our luck is far too bad. The follow-up treatment is quite troublesome after staying in this environment for too long. But it's fine. We're fully reimbursed. We don't need to worry about the cost. It was hard for Luo Nan to imagine the situation outside of the game setting. But through his observations during this period of time, he discovered that the citizens of Heavenly Abyss of the Hanguang system had a contradictory attitude toward the evil poison. Of course they knew that the evil poison pollution was a very troublesome matter. Otherwise, Zhang Zhao's mentality wouldn't have nearly collapsed. The early stages of the world of sin calamity also wouldn't have so many tragic cases that made people feel suffocated. But the evil poison pollution was a problem that the people of the Hanguang system had to come into contact with, face, and endure. No one lived in a vacuum, let alone a vacuum that couldn't block the pollution and infiltration of the evil poison environmental rules. Therefore, in the face of such a terrible situation, everyone in the relay station, be it the knights, the colonels, the sergeants, or the privates, all displayed a kind of calmness, as though they had given up. The evil poison was truly disgusting. Well, since they had already splashed it all over their bodies, then so be it. Of course, the evil poison pollution would have repercussions, and it would be very serious. There were over 10,000 soldiers in the base. Don't look at how each and every one of them was alive and kicking right now. After the war, they would have to pay a huge price for treatment. Even if the expenses were reimbursed, the treatment was bound to drag on for a long time. Variables would crop up everywhere. But so what? Everyone is forced to do so. Since the beginning of the world of sin calamity, the public version of the Empire's internal cultivation and law deployment has been updated practically every 30 years. After several hundred versions, it has long since changed beyond recognition when compared to the current one. Why? Liang Lu used his chin to point at Luo Nan as he asked this question. But he didn't expect Luo Nan to answer at all. He continued speaking, key techniques like internal cultivation and law deployment have been tempered over and over again. How many years have passed before they have accumulated their essence? They are the results of basic research done to the extreme. But how can basic research be broken through that easily? One iteration every 30 years. If one could have this kind of speed of progress, then the godly kingdom of the heavens would have to crawl on the ground and call them daddy. In the end, everyone has been living in the evil poison environment for a long time. They have been polluted and mutated by the environmental rules. They have no choice but to do this. Perhaps in a few hundred years, a few thousand years, people like us will be a completely different species from our ancestors even though we still retain our historical memories. We will be forced into a different evolutionary direction by the evil poison. Hey, did I say a bit too much? I didn't scare you, did I? Luo Nan answered honestly, not at the moment. Oh, you're that courageous. Our situation this time won't be worse than the one Captain Lu faced in the war to defend the ancestral domain back then. Liang Lu was startled for a moment, then he laughed out loud. that's the right way to think. The car slowed down on its own in the middle of his happiness. A large bionic device in the shape of an insect lay quietly within the pipeline tunnel approximately 50 meters in front of them. The 6 limbs spread out symmetrically. Each limb was as thick as an arm, but compared to the curved main cabin that was the size of a train carriage, they still appeared slender. As a result, when they propped themselves up at the bottom of the tunnel, they felt soft and powerless. Chapter 9:12. When they got closer, they were able to see that the enormous mechanical insect in front of them was nearly filled to the brim with pipelines. There were hundreds and thousands of larvae wriggling and undulating beneath its slender limbs. Some of them even flew up in the air, climbing to higher areas of the limbs. They moved in sequence and flowed ceaselessly. Oh! Liang Lu instantly exposed a few small details that contradicted his identity as an experienced person, but no one cared about this right now. The specialized maintenance vehicle continued to move forward. They got a bit closer, and the sparks that occasionally lit up between the larvae and the limbs allowed the two to see even more details. There were protrusions on top of the 6 limbs, and every protrusion was a special workstation that could accommodate 1 or 2 people. There were roughly 100 of them, but not even a tenth of them were in a working state right now. And the so-called larvae were actually all sorts of self-propelled maintenance robots. They would be driven by commands to move over if they were damaged, or if they needed to change their mounting tools. They would automatically divert between the limbs and the abdomen of this mechanical insect to complete the task of repair and replacement. TSK. The Earth Layer Patroller is a mid-sized mobile repair station. I never thought that I would actually need to use this big fellow for outdoor work. Luo Nan sized up the so-called repair station from head to toe. Its main body, excluding the limbs, was approximately 20 meters long. The widest part of its carapace-shaped body was at least 8 meters, and its height could reach approximately 6 meters. If the appearance of the limbs was taken into account, it would appear even more expansive. It looks bulky, but its structure can actually be shrunk. When it's finished, it can even use the spatial point-to-point permeation technique to warp the rock strata, allowing it to run extremely fast underground. Luo Nan couldn't help but let out a wow. He was quite fascinated. The only unfortunate thing was that this was the first time this special piece of equipment appeared, and it didn't feel particularly easy. The number of larvae under its abdomen was truly a bit too many. There were several hundred to 1,000 pieces of machinery and equipment waiting to be repaired. It would have been fine if there were 100 workstations. But there were less than 10 workstations on the 6 limbs. It was hard to avoid a bit of trouble dealing with all of them. So much so that the entire repair team became quite bloated. Just how much work has been accumulated here? No wonder they asked us to come and help. Liang Lu looked at this scene in detail. He was a bit apprehensive in his heart, but he had to put on a calm and collected appearance in front of Luo Nan. This is pretty good. Compared to the assembly line, this kind of position is more tempering. While they were talking, the maintenance vehicle was already approaching the tail of the soil patroller. After the signal connection was completed, a hole automatically opened in the area for the maintenance vehicle to enter and exit. However, the soil patroller's abdomen was filled with machinery waiting to be repaired, and the direction of the machinery's flow was also fixed. As the driver, Luo Nan switched to maglev mode under the suggestion of the AI in order to avoid interfering with the already excessively bloated queue. The body of the car floated in the air, passing over the larvae that covered the ground and gliding toward the opening. Liang Lu was still working hard to fulfill his duty as the commanding officer of the army. He stimulated Luo Nan's desire for victory. We can have a maintenance competition. Whoever loses will go find Zhan Xiao and get that out of print. Oh! Rumble! The sound of an explosion suddenly came. Actually, the first thing the two felt was the shock wave that directly oppressed and warped the air. It came crushing over from the side and front. So much so that they were unable to distinguish the following explosion. Was it a simple stimulation to their eardrums, or was it a vicious blow to their faces? Then their concussed brains gave off a signal of protest. Liang Lu was completely unprepared. His mind went blank, and the world spun around him. If it weren't for the flexible seatbelt's automatic restraint, he would have been flung a dozen meters away by the roofless maintenance vehicle. Not just him, even the maintenance vehicle that weighed more than 2 tons had its magnetic track restraint between it and the soil patrol forcibly broken under the impact that came without any warning. The body of the vehicle was clearly offset, and under the effect of the intermittent magnetic force, it swayed in the air like a heavy leaf before it smashed into the external armor layer at the edge of the entrance. There was no telling how thick it was. In the end, Liang Lu had undergone sudden impact training. It only took him 0.02 of a second to 3 breaths of time before he was jolted awake by the dual warnings from himself and the 2 AI in the maintenance vehicle. He didn't even have time to warn Luo Nan. He directly used his authority as a commanding officer to take back control of the maintenance vehicle and perform manual emergency evasion. But he was actually unable to take it back. Determination passed. Magnetic track correction complete. Preparing for collision. Motherf *cur. Liang Lu couldn't hold back from cursing. His final chance to adjust had already passed by the time his curses left his mouth. The flexible seatbelt had already bound him firmly to his seat, and the maintenance vehicle he was riding in had turned into a card that was flung out diagonally. It spun, scraped the edge of the metal at the edge of the entrance, and smashed into it with a whoosh. First, there was a clear, clang, sound of impact. It seemed to have been caught somewhere, and the entire body of the train flipped sideways. Before it had completely flipped over, the strong magnetic restraint gathered again, and the train made a surfing-like roll and returned to its original position. Then Liang Lu saw and experienced it. The maintenance vehicle smashed into the magnetic restraint ring. It was like a crazed beast that had been shot with a tranquilizer gun. It smashed forward in the narrow passageway. It smashed into the left wall, smashed into the right wall, smashed into the ceiling, and smashed into the floor. After 7 or 8 consecutive smashes, it finally digested the inertial force and came to a stop in disorder. Rumble. Another muffled sonic boom rang in his ears. The vehicle and his body bounced once more. Liang Lu subconsciously curled up his body into a defensive position before he came to a realization. This time, the entire Earth layer patroller was rocking. The second sonic boom was the same as the shock wave that nearly caused the car accident. It was just that they had entered the stomach of the Earth layer patroller. There was an additional layer of filtering buffer, so it wasn't that uncomfortable. This was. The fantasy breed servant army outside had begun a large-scale attack. They had really made it at the right time. Liang Lu finally came to his senses. He turned his head to look. Luo Nan, are you okay? Luo Nan was also firmly tied to his seat, but his hands were still propped up against the driver's seat sensor area. His arms were a bit stiff. Liang Lu was worried that his defensive posture wasn't in place and that his bones would be broken by the collision from the tumbling just now. I'm fine. Luo Nan's voice was still stable. His hands moved away from the sensor area, and at the same time, the two's flexible seatbelts automatically loosened, restoring their freedom. Liang Lu let out a long sigh. His scalp tightened. In that situation just now, if they really collided, it wouldn't be fatal. However, they would injure their muscles and bones, and they would be sent to the battlefield hospital. If this was the result of their first new mission, they wouldn't be able to raise their faces before the end of this battle. Liang Lu remembered something else when he thought of this. He pulled up the operation records of the special maintenance vehicle without a second thought. Even so. It was more daunting than dangerous, but he just couldn't understand why he didn't take back the control authority when he used his commanding officer authority. The last operation. Luo Nan. Yes, Gong Shi. Luo Nan responded. Liang Lu looked at the confused expression of his only subordinate soldier. His own mind was even more confused. What kind of operation is this? He saw that. No, that set of records showed that Luo Nan had promptly switched to manual mode the instant the special maintenance vehicle was detached from the magnetic track. He completed as many as 22 operations within 1,000th of a second. He forcefully completed the manual docking of the vehicle and the magnetic track, as well as the trajectory adjustment. It was this series of operations that helped the AI complete the most critical judgment of the situation. It allowed everything to return to the right track. Liang Lu only reacted in the latter half of this time frame. He attempted to take over the authority, but the AI had already determined the correctness of the previous set of operations. It gave Luo Nan more weight in the operations, and this caused Liang Lu's control to become ineffective. Basically, there were no mistakes in the logic. But how did Luo Nan enter and execute the 22 operation commands in the blink of an eye? Just how fast did his consciousness rotate in that instant? The operation records were drawn, right? Luo Nan looked at the records and was a bit baffled. I didn't do that much. Someone followed up just as the conversation began. What kind of operation? To put it nicely, it's an extreme operation. But to put it bluntly, it's an operation that scrapes the edge. It's an operation that's just a hair away from violating the rules. The answer to Liang Lu's doubt was a hoarse voice that suddenly appeared, sounding a little weak. The two people in the car looked in the direction of the voice. This was already the end of the passageway. It just so happened to be a parking area. Two similar maintenance vehicles were parked there, as well as some other means of transportation. But no one could be seen. Liang Lu and Luo Nan didn't dare to tarry. They happened to jump out of the car at the same time by chance. They stood ramrod straight and announced in a loud voice, Second-rank public officer Liang Lu, Private Luo Nan, has come under orders to report. It was still the same hoarse voice. He spoke powerlessly, you can see it. I'm your direct subordinate officer, Go Yi. If you have the time to talk nonsense, come over and help your officer up. Huh? The two looked at each other in dismay. Luo Nan's reaction was a bit faster. His line of sight shifted and he saw a shadow that didn't quite fit in between the two parked maintenance vehicles. After confirming the suspicious range, they focused their analysis. The two went, oh no, and ran forward together. They tried to lift up the person who was sandwiched between the two vehicles. But Luo Nan was stupefied when he just touched the edge. The current situation of this Lieutenant Go Yi really wasn't suitable for many people to use their strength. This was because this person's limbs were all severed from the shoulder to the hip. Moreover, he didn't have prosthetics installed. He had the appearance of a severe disability that was completely unable to take care of himself. Liang Lu was still able to recognize this person. He called out, Lieutenant Go, once more and carefully lifted him up, placing him on the side of the car. You've never seen a disabled person before, huh? Then do you know that this disabled person just helped you out? Lieutenant Go Yi was clearly already used to Luo Nan's current gaze. He had an indifferent expression, still full of the air of an officer. If I wasn't here, I wouldn't have used my only leg to adjust the magnetic orbit. You, Private Luo Nan, would have had to perform at least 50 instantaneous operations. That would be a completely illegal act of mental interference. I could immediately kick you back to 2 Hive. Chapter 9:13. What could Luo Nan say? He could only straighten his body and respond in a loud voice. Liang Lu, who was still supporting Go Yi, opened his mouth in an attempt to plead leniency for Luo Nan. But before he could speak, Go Ye's round face, which didn't have much dignity to it, turned around. His lips curled into a sneer, and you. Operational records. You still have the face to look at operational records, huh? Large amounts of instantaneous operational records that defied common sense. You should immediately think of the mutual interference that directly acted upon the configuration frame of the equipment. But you're still confused even now. Is he the commanding officer, or is he the corpse collection squad? There was nothing to say. Liang Lu and Luo Nan could only raise their voices a second time, yes, Captain. Just a few words back and forth, another wave of shock came, and the roaring sound suppressed the voices of Luo and Liang. As for Go Yi, his butt hung on the edge of the maintenance vehicle. He swayed back and forth. He really couldn't gather his breath. In the end, he could only glare at Luo Nan. My leg. Ah. Yes. Luo Nan could still be saved. He turned his head and searched by relying on Go Ye's explanation. Soon, he found the target that was tossed near the emergency control console at the entrance of the magnetic tracks. He jogged to a distance of 7 or 8 meters and picked up the leg prosthesis. There was even a pair of military pants hanging outside. During this time, Go Ye raised his eyebrows and asked Liang Lu for confirmation. Fish egg? Liang Lu grinned. It could be considered an apologetic smile, but in the end, he still answered very seriously, naturalized seed. Outstanding talent. Stable operation. 0 mistakes to this day. Regular operation is very stable. But once you exceed the scope and need to display your abilities freely, the nature of the fish egg will be exposed. Go Ye watched Luo Nan return and declined Luo Nan's offer to help install the prosthesis. His smooth and round body dropped down and the suction cup on his left hip latched onto the prosthesis. In this way, this person had become a left leg prosthesis. He could move freely. He was a disabled person. Luo Nan was a bit curious. After all, there were far too few people in a situation like Go Ye's in the front line zone of the relay station. Captain Go Ye didn't care about these gazes, but he was unwilling to stay here any longer. Let's go. It's better to talk about some things inside. As he spoke, he took the lead in moving his single-legged prosthesis. The exposed bionic toe joints were like 2 short legs, driving the entire body forward at a speed that normal people couldn't reach. It was fast and steady, as if he was gliding along the ground. It was fine to look at the overall situation, but it was rather comical to look at it in detail. However, what Luo Nan saw was how Lieutenant Go Ye utilized the prosthetic structure to complete functions that were absolutely impossible to preset. To put it bluntly, this was also an example of spiritual interference with the mechanical configuration. It was just that Lieutenant Go Ye had used the dynamo core to guide him from start to finish, completely adhering to the operating specifications. Perhaps, this was a state of doing as one pleases without breaking the rules. Luo Nan watched with rapt attention, so much so that Liang Lu was afraid that Luo Nan would be rude. Liang Lu poked Luo Nan in the dark to serve as a reminder. It was as if Go Ye had eyes in the back of his head. He went, "Hey, at this time, no need to make a fuss about nothing. I'm just an unlucky bastard who got screwed over by a certain long-range designer. Actually, I'm quite mighty normally, but the dozen or so multifunctional arms I use have all developed contamination deviations. All of them have been melted down. If this wasn't the case, I wouldn't be guarding this bug as a supervisor. I'd be on the production line this morning." Liang Lu glared at Luo Nan, and Luo Nan lowered his head in apology. Go Ye turned his head, "But you. Luo Nan, right?" "Yes, Lieutenant. I see that you don't have any misgivings with your interference configuration framework. It looks like you've been doing design for a long time. You're not the same as this miscellaneous trash next to you. Why didn't you stay in the 2 hive and make use of your talents?" Luo Nan was quite happy to receive such an evaluation from Lieutenant Go Ye, who had quite the professional air about him. But he didn't know why, so he could only look at Liang Lu. Liang Lu was quite dissatisfied with the evaluation of miscellaneous trash. But Lieutenant Go Ye wasn't like Zhan Xiao or Lu Andy, who he was familiar with. Within the military system, where ranks were clearly distinguished, Liang Lu could only listen. He received Luo Nan's pleading gaze, so he spoke honestly, reporting to Lieutenant. "We are the recruit squad. According to the latest requirements, we have all been transferred to the frontline maintenance department." Frontline? What kind of frontline is this? However, recruits really should see the world. Otherwise, they won't be unable to differentiate frontline from second line. Go Ye laughed out loud. Right now, the 3 of them had already followed the internal passageway and entered the central control room of the Earth Layer Patroller. The equipment here was densely arranged, and the space was extremely narrow. It was so small that it was almost stingy. Clearly, the Earth Layer Patroller had quite a bit of space to use. Go Yi saw Luo Nan's doubts and took the initiative to explain, this is for the sake of shrinking and escaping in a state of emergency. I'll give you guys a word of advice first. If you have the chance to truly go to the front lines, don't leave your workstations and wander around. Every year, the idiots who get squeezed to death when the bug transforms can at least form a squad the size of ours. Luo Nan could only agree. Go Yi stood in front of these complex equipment. He had lost both his arms, but he was able to communicate with the control panel through his mechanical toes. He was still able to realize efficient operations. He fiddled with the equipment as he explained the situation to the two of them. You guys came at a bad time. Well, it's quite a coincidence. Long-range attacks have just been restored outside. Even though the magnetite mica jellyfish's energy-siphoning tentacles have been restrained by the new version of the Time Fortress, the forceful smashing of the magnetite spirit hammer is quite intimidating. The various equipment in the base aren't suited to the new structure to begin with. Right now, a large amount of them have been destroyed by interference. Repairing them is quite torturous. The task is arduous. It's much more tiring than taking a stroll in the two honeycombs pipeline tunnel. Luo Nan and Liang Lu's work in the central pipeline tunnel wasn't as simple as taking a stroll. But since the officer had said this, they had nothing to refute. They listened to Go Ye's explanation seriously. Although Lieutenant Go Ye had a foul mouth, he wasn't a harsh person. Towards the two recruits who clearly lacked experience, his words could be said to be earnest and well-intentioned. Don't be afraid of being tired. Being tired is the best state you can be in here. If you're not tired, then you're dead. In the past, the scope of your work stopped at the safety partition area. I know that you've been cursing that long-range designer all this time, but you've always been under the protection of the core plane and the space-time fortress that he repaired. But right now, your work area has already extended out of the core plane. You've reached planet Vanguard 4. 400 meters up from here is the surface positions shield generator. Push forward another kilometer, and you'll reach the frontline array. Speaking of which, do you really think that the entire repair team is relying on these big bugs to be repairmen here? Luo Nan and Liang Lu could only shake their heads. And Luo Nan's thoughts went even further. So this was what Lieutenant Go Yi meant when he spoke of a long-range designer? Well, this was probably the official identity that the Innerverse simulator had arranged for his predecessor. In any case, it sounded much better than a self-righteous, wicked plaything. Lieutenant Go Yi was quite satisfied with the obedient attitudes of the two rookies. He didn't even turn his head as he continued to speak. For the repair team, the area of responsibility extends to wherever the pipeline extends. Work is no longer about nitpicking and finding trouble for nothing. Instead, it is about solving practical, life-threatening problems. Right now, the repair team has a full complement of 20 people. There are only 11 people here on the big bugs side, including you two. The other 9 people are going to deal with emergency situations according to the needs of the front lines. While I'm speaking, there might be some unlucky bastard who directly faces the assault of a fantasy breed and his servant army. He might even be dead by now. Luo Nan and Liang Lu glanced at each other. They were both speechless. Lieutenant Go Ye's mouth really had no taboo. He didn't care what the two rookies thought. He directly brought up the structural diagram of the Earth Layer Patroller, indicating for the two to see and remember it clearly. We're currently short on manpower. We have a full complement of 84 classified workstations. Only 8 have been activated. The flow isn't too smooth. You two must take up your responsibilities as soon as possible. Station 4, I'm talking about this appendage, the lower workstation 4 to 92, it's yours. I can give you two half an hour to get used to it. Seeing Lieutenant Go Ye's assignment, Liang Lu blurted out, the two of us will share a workstation. Aha. Lieutenant Go Ye confirmed as if it was a matter of course, the two of you will share a workstation. Isn't there a shortage of manpower? Strictly speaking, recruits aren't part of the manpower list before they are proven to be useful. Don't worry. I won't give you two a test to take charge of an area for now. Liang Lu's eyes went wide. But we. Lieutenant Go Yi twisted his face to look at him. Officer Liang Lu, the lowest rank in every workstation right now is Sergeant Major. Who gave you the courage to compare yourself with them before you've even entered the post? Yes, Lieutenant. Liang Lu's voice quickly weakened. Lieutenant Go Yi didn't seem to be truly angry. His tone didn't change at all. If nothing unexpected happens, we'll be traveling the entire base on the back of this big bug. But since this is a battlefield, accidents are normal. As I said just now, there may be people going on missions at any time. There may also be people dying. You two must have the ability to take charge of a workstation by yourself during this period of time. The faster the better. Of course, it's best if you possess the ability to take charge of an area. If there really is trouble, you two will be needed. Don't say stupid things like, "I'll fight with my life on the line." What the frontline soldiers need are solid equipment, reliable pipelines, and thick armor. These are achieved by relying on solid technology and abundant logistical supplies. Without these, no one would care even if you stuffed your own flesh and blood inside. No matter what Liang Lu and Luo Nan were thinking in their hearts, they were good soldiers who unconditionally carried out orders on the surface. They puffed out their chests at the same time, and it was unknown how many times they made the standard response, "Yes, Lieutenant." Go Yi turned around. He placed one foot on the ground, and his butt leaned against the control panel. He used this strange and unruly posture to face the two rookies. "That's all. You two can go to your workstations." "Oh right, the damaged magnetic track and the repair vehicle are all your jobs. Don't forget to fix them before you start work." Chapter 9:14. Beep. Activity source 6 to 23 is diverted. Egg host B comprehensive repair station 1. Mother-child type. Requesting replenishment of the liquid metal mechanical model and the original chip. Also requesting replacement of the internal factory module. Luo Nan twisted his neck. The soundproof earmuffs automatically turned on the response switch. Lower workstation 4 to 92 received. Spare parts for the liquid metal mechanical model and the internal factory module. Requesting 2 base numbers of the original chip. Received. Automatically updating the data of the spare parts requested. Request approved. The spare parts have entered the cargo corridor. Luo Nan didn't waste any time in communicating with the AI. He continued to bury his head in researching the work in his hands. 30 syncopators were like 30 flying ants. They surrounded the component clamped in his hands, moving up and down as they shuttled back and forth. The visible trajectory and the invisible but even more rigorous and beautiful configuration contours converged in the void. Luo Nan was in the middle of earnestly observing and understanding when he was jabbed in the shoulder. His train of thought was nearly interrupted. He raised his head and saw Liang Lu at the side. Liang Lu extended his hand to indicate for him to look at the flickering light and shadow icon on the transparent isolation cover in front of the workstation. The current Luo Nan couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as when he muddle-headedly participated in the offline test. He soon found his target from the dazzling visual data. Spare parts loss rate, 4%. Spare parts application rate, 100%. Spare parts module usage, 77 base numbers. Spare parts reuse rate, 31%. Lower workstation ranking, 1, Luo Nan went, "Oh." He understood Liang Lu's meaning. This meant that their group of workstations was ranked first among the 3 lower workstations out of the 8 workstations that the Soil Patrol was currently working at, based on their total work volume, work quality, work efficiency, sustainability, and other factors. Worthy of praise. Continue to work hard. Luo Nan grinned, accepting the encouragement from his superior. Then he lowered his head once more and continued with his previous work. Luo Nan's consciousness worked, and the configuration design of the handheld component gradually appeared within the notebook space of the auxiliary AI. It also appeared in the virtual work area in front of him. It was compared with the original data in the base's database. Luo Nan paid attention to the real thing aside from comparing the data. It wasn't just the one in his hand, but also the workstation he was at. A new disassembled component appeared. That's right. The 6 limbs that the soil patroller extended were not just to arrange the workstations. At the very end and at the very bottom was an automatic maintenance node. When the self-propelled equipment that needed to be repaired gathered here, some of the common and relatively simple faults were directly solved at the automatic maintenance node. If the system determined that it could not be repaired automatically, it would be handed over to the various workstations for disposal. In addition to this, there was another situation. Some equipment that had been determined to have no value to repair would be dismantled at the automatic maintenance node. The enormous noise that forced Luo Nan to wear his soundproof earmuffs came from this. Under the intervention of artificial intelligence, the automatic maintenance node would retain the reusable components, reclassify, refurbish, and transport them to the parts warehouse of each workstation for second use. Just now, Liang Lu had pointed out a series of statistics in this area. Such a setup could greatly improve the sustainable utilization of equipment resources. It was even more valuable in field operations. It was just that Luo Nan wasn't interested in the work of reusing parts. It was the same even if his workstation's relevant data was among the best. All he cared about was how to restore the configuration design to the greatest extent possible in a specific system for a specific component. So he didn't hesitate to expend his mental energy to restore the configuration design of all the parts, facilities, and equipment that had passed through his hands. This was to gain a deeper understanding of the overall train of thought and considerations of the product designer. He traced back to the source and sought for a thorough understanding. For a maintenance personnel, engaging in this sort of reconstruction research was a waste of time under the premise that they already possessed detailed basic information. But who asked Luo Nan's 2-person workstation to be in such a special situation? Poof! Luo Nan was once again called out by his superior. It was a bit strange. Wasn't it Liang Lu's working time right now? The host Egg B was the most common and highly modular self-propelled comprehensive repair station. They had already repaired no less than 40 of them in the past few days. Aside from the first few that needed to be gnawed on because they weren't too familiar with the situation, they should have been repaired with their eyes closed. He asked through the communications device of his soundproof earmuffs, "Officer, is there a problem?" Liang Lu didn't respond. Instead, he straightened his back in his seat a second ago. He used an incomparably proper posture to speak loudly. In his nervousness and haste, he actually forgot to turn on his communications device. Of course, Luo Nan couldn't hear a thing. But Luo Nan wasn't an idiot. How could he not understand what was going on when he saw Liang Lu's posture? He immediately gave up on the wasteful activity in his hands and turned off the soundproof function of his earmuffs. He sat up straight like Liang Lu and reported amidst the deafening rumbling and vibrations of the outside world, "Hello, Lieutenant." The current Luo Nan was becoming more and more like a native of the Hangguang Galaxy. He was already used to restraining his mental senses to avoid being exposed to the polluted environment. But because of this, he became sluggish. He didn't even notice that someone had walked up behind him. Oh, Liang Lu said that the military had a few sensing methods built upon the foundation of using the dynamo core. Though they weren't as comprehensive and specific as mental senses, they were extremely sharp and incisive. He had to learn them no matter what. Luo Nan entered a state of introspection and was a bit distracted. Fortunately, Lieutenant Go Yi, who had suddenly arrived between the two of them. He just looked at the visual data on the isolation barrier. He didn't mind their attitude and reactions. Liang Lu tilted his head slightly and winked at Luo Nan. Then he directly threw himself into the work of repairs that was in full swing. The workstation was like a battlefield. Even if the hierarchy was strict, unnecessary etiquette could be dispensed with in a working state. So Liang Lu was confident and in the right when he threw the blame to Lieutenant Go Yi. As for Luo Nan, who was unfortunately in an idle state, he needed to face Lieutenant Go Ye's interrogation during his post-patrol. Go Yi still had the image of a cripple who supported himself with one leg. It would be very hard for him to complete the overly complex operations if he were to personally do the work. But his considerable standard and abundant experience in the professional field allowed him to possess the qualifications and ability to instruct all the maintenance soldiers on the Earth Layer Patroller, 77 base units. Based on the calculation of 20 equipment for each base unit, your efficiency these past 2 days is pretty good. Luo Nan had forcefully translated the unit of time in the heavenly Yuan Empire into the level of day. It was only about 14 hours. 2 days was about 28 hours. Luo Nan had handled 1,500 pieces of equipment during this time, and his success rate was considerable. With this foundation, Luo Nan accepted Go Ye's evaluation with a clear conscience. "Thank you, Lieutenant. Yesterday at this time, the spare parts recycling rate on your workstations was only 7%. Now it has already soared to over 30%. You're living quite frugally. Have you considered the failure rate?" Chapter 9:15. Luo Nan really hadn't considered it. He used the syncopator to analyze the configuration, and then dissected the design using the idea of configuration design. Then, he saw where he could use it. Of course, he used it immediately. As for the follow-up, he didn't think too much about it. Besides, didn't they all pass the systems inspection? Is there a law that prohibits me from doing that? Luo Nan was a bit confused. However, Go Yi didn't criticize him either. He only moved forward a short distance, and the only available mechanical prosthesis was connected to the control panel of the workstation. With great familiarity, he brought up a series of data, which was the tracking information of all the equipment that had undergone repair procedures at this workstation. This kind of high-level data was still an important judgment basis for the merit evaluation of maintenance positions. Luo Nan didn't have the authority to retrieve it, so he never understood it. He was somewhat curious and took the opportunity to satisfy his curiosity. However, the efficiency of his naked eyes compared to Go Ye's reading speed with the dynamo core was worlds apart. Go Ye finished reading hundreds of thousands of pieces of information in the span of a breath. Soon, the basic data interface disappeared. Go Ye mumbled a few keywords. Self-handling missions, not bad. Battle loss rate, meaningless. Second failure rate 7.1%. Average. Hehe, not bad. As Go Ye's mouth opened and closed, a portion of the key data visualized chart structure appeared within the isolation barrier. He had already done a certain degree of data analysis during this time, allowing the work results of Luo Nan and Liang Lu's workstations to appear more clearly. What should be done has been done. What should be done has been done. What should be done has been done. He's completely following the drill manual. What a good child. Luo Nan didn't know whether Go Ye's words were compliments or insults. He would just treat it as a compliment for the time being. At this moment, Liang Lu had already completed the rapid repair of the ovipositor B's comprehensive repair station. Usually, at this stage, the artificial intelligence would quickly assign new tasks and would never let a workstation be idle for too long. But wasn't Go Yi here? He issued an order at the right time. Liang Lu and Luo Nan's virtual world, as well as the isolation barrier, displayed a pause icon. The two rookies turned their heads, confused as to what Go Yi was going to do. Go Ye's round face was full of smiles, and he didn't look like an officer at all. If he still had his prosthetics, he would probably be smiling and stroking the two dogs' heads to show his love. You've been working for 2 consecutive days without making any obvious mistakes. Very good. However, I can't be arrogant and complacent. I still need to recharge myself in time. It's time to study now. Learn what? Captain, are you going to give us some pointers? Luo Nan's train of thought was simple, but Liang Lu's thought was a layer deeper. Though he had irresponsibly thrown Go Yi to Luo Nan to deal with, this didn't mean that he didn't respect Go Yi. On the contrary, if this experienced maintenance veteran, who was praised by even a colonel, was willing to guide them, he would definitely be more than happy to do so. However, Go Yi chuckled and shook his head in denial. You've been working so hard without sleep and rest. The level of your studies can definitely be raised a little more. This is the training video for the promotion of colonels. Promoted to a major. Training. Aha, an analysis of the current situation and the direction of the logistics work in the near future. Liang Lu was startled when he heard that, then he came to his senses. His pretty face was filled with excitement. It's our turn. You mean the Jade Crystal Formation? Go Yi glanced at him. Don't make wild guesses. Won't you know when you learn? Understood. Liang Lu's voice was loud and clear, no matter what Go Yi said. In other words, he had a 99% certainty. Actually, Liang Lu, Zhan Xiao, and Lu Andy, these professionals with considerable attainments in the field of configuration knowledge, had already guessed the core of this unforeseen event when the two knights and Colonel Xingzhan arrived at the scene of the contamination. All of the reactions done by the relay station were related to this core, whether overt or covert. In fact, mid-level officers like Zhan Xiao had already participated in the relevant training. The decision-makers of the relay station didn't have any intentions of deliberately hiding the crisis. However, this matter was quite specialized. Not everyone could understand it smoothly. Plus, it was wartime right now. Every soldier in the relay station had a mission. It was impossible for them to all go off post for training. They could only take turns. And Colonel Xingzhan was a famous busy man. In the end, he could only use this sort of compromise method. From top to bottom, from key departments to peripheral positions, from directly related personnel to unrelated personnel. They were trained in sequence. Rookies like Luo Nan and Liang Lu were able to get their turn at this stage mainly by relying on the position bonuses of the maintenance personnel of the logistics department. Go Yi saw that Liang Lu and Luo Nan weren't ignorant people, so he didn't feel like saying anything more. He indicated to them that they could go. Liang Lu didn't say anything further as he began to organize the workstations. He even indicated to Luo Nan to keep up with the pace and not waste time. Luo Nan obviously listened to his commanding officer. However, the true commanding officer changed his mind at the last moment just as he took off his soundproof earmuffs. Hold on. Since you guys are in this state, then you might as well take turns. You guys can rest, but you can't. That's pretty good. Huh? Liang Lu and Luo Nan were startled at first, then delighted. Go Ye's words were clearly correcting his earlier arrangement of having the two of them squeeze into the same workstation. It was tantamount to recognizing their ability to work independently. Yes, Lieutenant. Liang Lu and Luo Nan spoke at the same time. Liang Lu even clenched his fists in secret, cheering for the sake of quickly justifying himself. Liang Lu had Luo Nan go listen to the lecture first. He was quite interested in Colonel Xingzhan's training course. Luo Nan was very interested in Colonel Xingzhan's training course, but he really didn't want to move right now. He shook his head and said, I feel pretty good during this period of time. I'll stay a bit longer. Call me later. The emotional state of a technician was the one that was completely unreasonable. Liang Lu knew how much Luo Nan cared before. It didn't seem like Luo Nan was simply giving way out of courtesy. He thought for a bit and didn't press the issue any further. Then I'll make some notes first. You can refer to them later. Okay. The two reached an agreement. Liang Lu jumped up and saluted Go Yi. He hurried out of the workstation and rushed to the training room. The pause icon of the isolation cover disappeared at nearly the same time. A new round of tasks had arrived. The advantage of the two workstations was completely lost as soon as Liang Lu left. A single workstation had to repair 1,500 pieces of equipment within 30 hours. Such a flow rate was no longer able to allow Luo Nan to calmly split and reconstruct. He quickly entered a working state to deal with the equipment queues that flowed over one after another. The vast majority of maintenance tasks at the lower workstations were those that were hard to handle with the automatic maintenance process, but they were relatively low-end problems. Luo Nan didn't need to use too much of his brain. He just needed to make accurate judgments, choose the appropriate materials, and act fast. It was because of this that Luo Nan would subconsciously use the syncopator to cut the more special equipment problems the moment he bumped into them during such a busy time. Luo Nan might not have the time to ponder deeply, but he would always encounter similar situations no matter how special this sort of large flow and highly repetitive task flow was. He couldn't see through it the first time. He couldn't see through it the second time. He couldn't see through it the third or fifth time. He wouldn't miss it. Whenever there was a gap of a dozen or 20 seconds between two maintenance tasks, Luo Nan would quickly organize and record these small gains. Through this method, Luo Nan quickly absorbed the mature and complete configuration design results of the Heavenly Yuan Empire. He endlessly enriched his own knowledge base. He didn't feel bored at all, he just enjoyed it. The feeling is really good. Your foundation is quite solid. Your condition is even rarer. For the 100-year sequence to produce such a talent, the Department of Science and Education should treat you as a model. They should be bragging about you. Luo Nan's heartbeat sped up in an instant from the soundproof earmuffs. Only now did he realize that Go Yi hadn't left yet. He had been observing from behind all this time. Speaking of which, this could already be considered interfering with his work. Lieutenant Go Yi didn't seem to be aware of this. He continued to evaluate Luo Nan. Your hobbies are out of the ordinary. Many people know that the syncopator is useful, but it's rare to see someone use it as frequently as you do. However, there's something I don't quite understand. If you trained in this solid foundation in the general knowledge course of the 100-year sequence, then even if you've never come into contact with military equipment before, there should be quite a high rate of mechanical configuration designs in related civilian products. Is there a need to carry treasures back to your home, to take notes one by one, to proofread them all over again? Luo Nan's hands didn't stop working, but his mind was a bit muddled. He didn't know how to respond. Was he supposed to say that he had gone through the most basic of learning and practice in a sandstorm filled with space-time configuration fragments? At the same time, he relied purely on self-study. He hadn't received any formal foundational education in configuration. Speaking of which, what in the world was the Inner-Verse simulator doing? How could it allow a gamer to fall into such an awkward and sensitive situation? Lieutenant Go Yi blew on the syncopator while Luo Nan was crazily ridiculing in his mind. The syncopator, which Luo Nan had been controlling, suddenly deviated from its original trajectory. It spun and spun on the control panel. Or is it that you didn't learn mechanical configuration design in school? You walked the path of bionics or genetic layouts? Actually, I studied space-time design. Luo Nan thought about these words, but he didn't say them. In the end, he could only respond vaguely, I just learned blindly. And at this time, he shouted loudly in his mind, hurry up and show yourself, simulator of the Inner-Verse. He didn't know if the simulator had shown itself, but Lieutenant Go Yi really did laugh at this moment. All right. That's a possibility. However, speaking of the syncopator, this little thing is a mechanical creation, but the source isn't that solid. The credit of the School of Fantasy is a bit bigger. It said that it's an accessory to the School of Fantasy's research on the alien species. The School of Fantasy? Luo Nan wasn't too clear on this concept, but it wasn't good for him to ask. He just listened to Go Yi speak. The syncopator is very different from the School of Creation in their hands. It's gaudy, but it's especially capable. It can even simulate a senior lord-level alien species and a fantasy species. Later on, they had to simulate the nefarious poison revolution. In the end, they flipped many times, suffering disastrous casualties. The golden age of the mental side has already passed. The domain of configuration doesn't have a solid material foundation. It's far too easy for problems to arise. The School of Fantasy has declined because of this. Legend has it that the perpetual configurations that are active in the depths of the Sky Abyss Spirit Network, capable of imprisoning and taming fantasy breeds, have been annihilated one by one. Chapter 9:16. Hey, Lieutenant Go, you're still here. 40 minutes later, Liang Lu finished his training and came back. He was quite surprised to see Go Yi still at his workstation. He thought that he had figured it out and defended Luo Nan. Lieutenant, Luo Nan's mind is very clear. His hands are very steady. There's absolutely no problem even if he's here alone. Yes, there's no problem. Lieutenant Go Yi casually admitted. He watched as Luo Nan completed yet another maintenance mission. Then he used this time to clarify his statement. It's because there's no problem that he can't be here. Huh? Since you can work independently, your workstations must be separated for the sake of efficiency. It just so happens that Sergeant Xian Zhu has gone to the front lines to deal with an accident. A few workstations have been adjusted, and 1 to 95 is empty. Luo Nan will fill in. Let's see how it goes. Luo Nan will definitely be fine. Liang Lu answered happily. Then he suddenly froze. Go to Station 1. That's quite far. Go Yi laughed. How big is this bug? Liang Lu knew that this had nothing to do with size. According to the current work intensity, the two might not see each other for the next 8 to 10 days if they were to be separated on the same Earth layer patroller. Working independently. Working independently. Speaking of independence, the only soldier he could control was the one who was given independence. He was a bit stunned. He thought of something and said, "This Luo Nan is my soldier." Yeah, you brought him. Go Yi looked at him with a smile. Do you have any objections to this deployment? How could Liang Lu dare to have any objections? Plus, for a rookie like Luo Nan, being able to work independently was undoubtedly the most important affirmation, aside from a promotion and a promotion. He was just a bit awkward. As the highest person in charge of this Earth layer patroller, Go Yi didn't care what Liang Lu was thinking. He confirmed the time and spoke to Luo Nan. You have 1 minute to pack your personal belongings. Then go to the military classroom to look at the radiographic films. Come to workstation 1 to 84 before 9 o'clock today and start working. Your work data from 4 to 92 will be automatically merged into the past. If you have any objections to the data merging results and basis, you too can apply for a review after the end of this mission. No problems, right? Liang Lu and Luo Nan immediately responded. No problems. Go Yiyang raised his eyebrows and didn't say anything else. Substitution technique carried his figure backward and entered the elevator tunnel. He didn't know where he went. There were only 2 people left at the workstation. Luo Nan and Liang Lu looked at each other in dismay. Probably because Lieutenant Go Yi had taken care of the adaptability of the workstations, no new missions were assigned during this period of time. This gave the 2 of them some time to talk. I only wanted to work on my own. I didn't expect to be sent so far away. Liang Lu was a bit vexed. He trusted Luo Nan's professional talent and skills quite a bit. It was just that Luo Nan's abnormal way of thinking about sacrificing common sense that made Liang Lu a bit worried. He unconsciously scratched his head and asked in a puzzled and troubled manner, "What did Lieutenant Go say to you just now?" Luo Nan began to tidy up his personal belongings. Actually, there wasn't much to tidy up. At most, he just needed to organize his data files so that they could be seamlessly connected to his new workstation. He did not hide anything from Liang Lu, and there was no need for him to do so. Lieutenant Go introduced me to a technique called fantasy mimicry. This was an answer that Liang Lu had not expected. What mimicry? Fantasy mimicry. It's said that it's one of the supporting technologies when the School of Fantasy invented the syncopation apparatus. It's just that it's undergone a few improvements now. Luo Nan recalled the conversation just now and roughly summarized, it's a technique that uses the syncopation apparatus as a tool and utilizes a specific bionic configuration to guide and utilize mental abilities. It can bestow additional functions to the target, similar to a blessing. Lieutenant Go feels that I'm quite suited to learn this method. Liang Lu's eyes went wide. He wants to teach you. He copied a learning program for me earlier. He told me to study it by myself when I had the time. If I didn't understand anything, I could ask him. He harbors evil intentions. Huh? Liang Lu gestured excitedly. You still can't tell. He wants to poach you. He's giving you benefits, and he's hanging you. He wants you to work under him. Aren't we working under him? Liang Lu choked for a moment. His brain circuits were a bit off. A new mission was finally assigned at this time. The AI beeped and Liang Lu had no choice but to split some of his energy to handle the work on hand. But he was still unwilling in his heart. He seized every second to speak to Luo Nan. Don't forget that it was Lieutenant Commander Sheng Zhan who arranged for me to lead you. You must let the Lieutenant Commander know of this matter. Listen to his opinion. Oh, okay. Luo Nan could roughly see the subtle psychology of the young officer before him. He felt that it was a bit comical, but the feeling of being cared for was pretty good. He laughed in response and said, I asked Lieutenant Go about this mimicry technique. He said that you can learn it as well. So I made an extra copy of the learning program. I just sent it to you. Liang Lu went, oh my. He nearly made a mistake with his hands. When he turned his head in the midst of being busy, he just happened to see Luo Nan give him a salute. Luo Nan retreated into the elevator passageway. Then the door closed and his line of sight was cut off. Liang Lu stomped his foot. He didn't care if Luo Nan could hear him or not. He shouted loudly, I've also sent you the important notes for the Lieutenant Commander Sheng Zhan training class. The echoes of his shout buzzed within the closed workstation space. Then it was drowned out by an even more intense clamor. The 5th round of the 1st Army's classroom training class will begin in 10 breaths of time. Participants, please report promptly. If there are special circumstances, please directly request a leave of absence from Lieutenant Go Yi. Luo Nan hurriedly came out from the elevator passageway under the AI's reminder. He followed the new mission instructions and moved towards the 1st Army classroom. Though time was tight, he still glanced behind him. It was as if he could pierce through the ice-cold metal barrier and see Liang Lu. This was a character that Luo Nan already knew of even before he entered the game setting. Luo Nan grew more and more convinced that everything he experienced had once truly existed. At the very least, it was a projection and transformation of a certain reality. Let's not talk about anything else. Liang Lu was vivid and lifelike. He had flesh and blood. Whether it was the twisted expression of his emotions or the projection of his mental state, all of them possessed a solid foundation of character. Luo Nan absolutely did not believe that this was merely a fusion of millions upon millions of fragmented pieces of information. Perhaps in essence, what he experienced was still a game, a dream. But the basic material that constituted this dream. He was convinced that he had touched upon the temperature of life. Luo Nan let out a long sigh. The immersion in the game setting had loosened a bit from this sudden feeling of emotion. But it didn't take much effort for the game setting to return to a stable state. The military classroom was just ahead. Luo Nan practically used the last breath of time to step inside. Then he heard the Lieutenant Commander Sheng Zhan's exceptionally loud and clear voice, the training has begun. Everyone, concentrate your energy. I'll first state my conclusion, the relay station has already lost its foundation of long-term defense. All work currently needs to serve the purpose of counterattack, or escape. Chapter 9:17. In order to ensure a good audiovisual effect, the military classroom was very dark, and the interior was not big, at most able to accommodate about 10 people. Now, it was empty. There wasn't even a seat. Luo Nan only saw one person when he entered. The person was sitting cross-legged on the ground in a very casual manner. There was even a medical robot beside him, buzzing around him. There was the smell of blood in the room. It was obvious that this person was injured, and the medical robot was treating his wounds. Luo Nan pondered. This person was probably a veteran maintenance soldier who had returned from the front lines. He had finished his mission and returned to recover from his injuries. But he still came to participate in the training. It could be said that he was extremely hardworking. Since the class had already begun, Luo Nan found it inappropriate to greet the wounded soldier. He walked softly and quietly to the position behind the wounded soldier and copied the wounded soldier. He sat on the ground and raised his head to watch the video. The scene at the beginning was very similar to the day when Colonel Jean had lined up a row of learning boards. They were all arranged with a lot of formulas and diagrams, the kind that could make a non-professional's head explode. Moreover, the video had been processed by technology, and it was very immersive. It made people feel as if they were at the scene, and the grumpy Lieutenant Colonel Xing Zhan could point at their noses and ask questions at any time. Lieutenant Colonel Xing Zhan raised his voice and said, "It's meaningless to evaluate the remote designer's plan. We just need to understand what kind of environment this professional has built and how to adapt to it as soon as possible." First. The playback of the video suddenly paused. Luo Nan was in the middle of retrieving the class notes that Liang Lu had sent him. He was a bit stupefied when he saw the situation. He subconsciously believed that the video had malfunctioned. Right when he was about to get up and take a look at the situation, the wounded soldier in front of him turned around. "Hey, kid, basic version or interactive version?" The man's back was facing the light from the video. The shadow on his face and the reflection of the metal structure intertwined, making him look quite ferocious. Such an image was a little similar to Sir Shi Yuan, whom he had met once before. However, he was relatively short and thin, and his domineering aura was far inferior. He looked more like a ruffian soldier. Purely from his senses, this person's appearance and tone did not seem to be a good person. But since the other party took the initiative to communicate, Luo Nan responded honestly, "Sir, I didn't know there were different versions. This is my first time." "Yes, sir." Luo Nan had already seen the insignia of this person's position. It was a non-commissioned officer rank. This person would certainly be able to control Luo Nan. This was the duty of a private soldier. The sergeant continued, "Logically speaking, you should read the basic version. It's fine as long as you know the general meaning. But I really don't want to waste my time with you. By the way, how long is your training schedule?" Luo Nan confirmed the current time. "I'll be at work at 9 o'clock. There's nearly an hour left." Of course, he was referring to the Heavenly Abyss unit, which was equivalent to about 80 minutes of Earth time. The sergeant was a little taken aback. "That's very lenient. Has old Go become kind? Let's watch the interactive version together. If there's anything you don't understand, you can ask. Think carefully before you ask. Don't talk nonsense, don't be long-winded, otherwise don't blame me for kicking you out." "Ah, okay." Luo Nan felt that although this person had a bad mouth, he was actually quite easy to deal with. At the very least, he could take care of other people's actual circumstances. As for what the interactive version was, Luo Nan sought assistance from the AI and soon found out the answer, so it turned out that this training course was interactive. Its basic content was recorded for the first time when he was promoted to a field officer. It was only half an hour in length. The content of this half an hour was actually edited from Xing Zhan's training course for middle and high-ranking technical officers. It was a bit too profound. Most of the non-professionals were just there to watch the show and understand the basic situation and things to take note of. But for the basic technical officers, they had to delve into it more or less. Watching it once was definitely not enough, and there was no need to repeatedly slice it frame by frame. Therefore, it was designed in an interactive format. The trainee could ask questions in the form of a message, asking specific questions in actual operations. The AI would sort it out and hand it over to Xing Zhan or other technical experts for an answer. Then it would be edited and processed again, realizing a second refinement and expansion of the key and difficult content, endlessly supplementing the training content. Therefore, theoretically speaking, the interactive version that the trainee watched would be different every time. And the more time passed, the richer the content would be. The more popular it would be, and the more practical it would be. As time allowed, Luo Nan obviously wanted to watch the most valuable version. The training video continued to play. Xing Zhan didn't waste words and went straight to the point. First of all, the most direct effect of this structural design is to interfere with the magneto-optical mica jellyfish. It destroys the space-time environment that is highly advantageous to the opponent, rendering the energy-stealing tentacle ineffective. It protects the plane of the base's jade crystal array. Clearly, the original situation was destroyed and the space-time fortress was reconstructed. This was the main goal of the designer. The base really needed this at the time, and he succeeded. However, that person's design philosophy completely disregarded safety regulations. Moreover, it had a high degree of classical inclination. It fully utilized an interactive interference structure to pursue the dynamic equilibrium of different rules and environments. It didn't have any misgivings about the evil and poisonous environment. It boldly utilized it. I lack in-depth research into space-time configurations. I don't know if this was the only path to take at the time. However, that person did subvert the principle of opposing the jade crystal array and the evil and poisonous environment. The two were sufficiently stirred in the environmental rules, influencing and permeating each other. The result was that the evil and poisonous environment seeped into the base, forming pollution. It brought about a large negative interference. Due to the requirements of his post, Officer Shao continuously observed the changes in the space-time environment. Therefore, he was directly affected. And outside of the base, the enemy's attacks were relatively weak. There is sufficient evidence to prove that they suffered from the reverse infiltration of the jade crystal array's rules. They are also adapting and adjusting. The environment that influences and permeates each other cannot be reversed in a short period of time. Whoever adapts faster will have the advantage. In this regard, compared to the magnet photon mica jellyfish of the Grand Monarch rank, our net-type jade crystal array has a very weak self-cleaning ability before it is ignited and connected to the internet. We can basically confirm that it will be scrapped in 4 weeks, and its full power won't last more than 3 weeks at most. Within 3 weeks, there are 2 opportunities to reverse the situation. The first is that the forward operating base is completed and can be ignited and connected to the network. The second is that reinforcements arrive in time. If they don't arrive in time, then we will have to make preparations to break out. But no matter what, we must ensure that the jade crystal array of the relay station operates stably even though it is sick. We must upgrade and transform all sorts of equipment, especially the dynamo core. We must install filtering and suppression functions to reduce the negative interference of the evil and poisonous pollution as much as possible. This was the basic point of view of Officer Xiao Luo. He didn't make dry statements. Instead, he used a complete set of models and logic to illustrate the problem through a large number of structural diagrams. Luo Nan's eyes were a feast for the eyes. Actually, there were quite a few mathematical models that he didn't understand. But he was the main culprit. He was the one who caused the disaster. Even if his thoughts and designs back then had become fuzzy under the stress of the exam, these impressions were quickly being refreshed as the repeated stimulation of the course. Chapter 9:18. In the end, the training course wasn't an academic class. Through rigorous theory and data logic, Lieutenant Commander Sheng Zhan explained the current difficulties faced by the relay station and their root causes. Then he began to arrange specific work. In fact, the current logistics department had already begun to shift its focus. The core of this shift was the various equipment represented by the dynamo core. They had already begun to undergo wartime modifications, production, replacement, and the corresponding design changes. According to Lieutenant Commander Sheng Zhan, the various internal and external dynamo cores had reached 99.8% of the 11,000 soldiers in the relay station. It was more or less covered. This was also the usual atmosphere of the Heavenly Yuan Empire. The dynamo core was the mainstream technology that permeated every level of society. The installation and usage of various dynamo cores had always been high. Basically, entering society was the beginning of a series of changes in the dynamo core version. Not to mention in the military, where individuals didn't need to bear the cost. Young people who still had a vision for the future needed external dynamo cores to guarantee their combat strength under the test of blood and fire. Those who had no more potential in their personal cultivation needed internal dynamo cores to increase their ability level. Under these circumstances, changing the design of the dynamo core in order to increase the adaptability of the sinister environment was a huge project. The complex arrangements of defense lines, departments, and personnel simply made people go crazy. Everyone would be affected. Why did the two rookie recruits, Liang Lu and Luo Nan, have their posts pushed further and further away? It was precisely because the replacement work of the dynamo core and other equipment was initiated that the base adopted the strategy of trading materials for time. In any case, they didn't need to worry about the defense mission in 3 or 4 weeks. The large amount of equipment and consumables stored in the relay station were all piled up on the production line. In a short period of time, a large amount of anti-pollution self-propelled mechanical equipment was produced. The parameters of the artificial intelligence were adjusted, and the limited personnel responsible for the modification of the dynamo core design was given. This caused the maintenance work of an important area like the 2 hive to return to the state where the majority of the maintenance work was done by the AI system and machinery. In the current environment, the rate of equipment damage was bound to be high due to the explosive flow of mechanical soldiers. The maintenance personnel and equipment couldn't keep up, so it was simply better to build than to repair. Large amounts of personnel were stuffed into production posts. The assembly line operation formed a closed loop of production, failure, scrapping, recycling, and production. The core region of the 2 honeycomb central pipeline achieved automatic maintenance. People like Liang Lu and Luo Nan, who had lost their posts, would be chased out before they could even get on the assembly line. At present, the limited maintenance personnel had been pushed to the front line or the areas close to the front line, in order to provide more efficient logistical support for the frontline troops and the areas that had not implemented artificial intelligence maintenance before the overall equipment change was completed, so that they could be a buffer. Compared to the shift in focus of the base's defense strategy, purely technical issues were only one part of it. Of course, right now Luo Nan was only concerned with technical issues. A quarter of the training course for the promotion to field officer was about logic, a third was about work arrangements, and the rest was about specific technical ideas and requirements. But when it came to the technical explanation stage, Luo Nan's interest and his level of understanding were far from being able to reach the stage of complete encirclement. For example, the material selection and scheduling, the production line process, and the artificial intelligence content, he was like a duck listening to thunder. Only the dynamo core and some parts of the equipment structure were his cup of tea. Lieutenant Colonel Sheng Zhan spoke frankly. He was not an expert in the aspect of dimensional configuration, so he could not reconstruct the fortress itself. What he could consider was the basic logical judgment of the problems that would occur with the jade crystal array of the relay station and all sorts of equipment in the new environment, as well as the corresponding configuration design, modification, and manufacturing plans. These things did not seem to have a direct relationship with the dimensional configuration design itself, but they were the most technical content on the material plane. At the very least, they were the most logical reflections of configuration. Deducing this back, it played an extremely important role in verifying the gains and losses of Luo Nan's examination thinking back then. It was roughly equivalent to the verification or falsification of the experimental design thinking. Luo Nan was unable to directly obtain an answer, but it was precisely this mode of thinking that required retroactive reasoning that formed an even sharper sublation of his previous examination thinking. Needless to say, there were countless mature and ruthless designs that were pushed out as if they cost nothing during this process. Every plan was a classic and the essence of the heavenly Yuan Empire's tens of thousands of years of research on configuration. They corresponded to different periods, different environments, and different rules of thought on configuration design. In the training video, Lieutenant Commander Sheng Zhan displayed the graceful bearing of a master. He casually picked and selected plans, or part of the essence or supplementary materials of the plans. All of them had the solid support of theory and data. He casually pointed out the possibilities and even the experiences of failure. All of them were the summaries of countless experiences. Luo Nan was practically engulfed by the knowledge that assaulted his face, as well as the happiness that followed. Only when it came to certain domains that he was not proficient in did he have the space to take a breather. If it was possible, he even hoped that this training class would continue in an endless loop, right when he was in a wonderful state, the image in front of him suddenly froze. Luo Nan subconsciously let out an especially loud, "Hey." This time he had some experience. He directly looked at the officer in front of him, and the officer just happened to turn his head. "Hey, kid. You're not mute, right?" Luo Nan looked at him with wide eyes. He was unable to believe that the officer had severed his mental enjoyment with just a few words. The officer saw Luo Nan's expression and frowned. "You're really mute. Did you understand?" Luo Nan took a deep breath and adjusted his mood. He still answered honestly, "The configuration design part is okay, but the other parts aren't too good." "Really? The configuration design? The goal is quite clear." The officer looked at Luo Nan's epaulette as he spoke, confirming Luo Nan's rank. It was hard not to be surprised in his words. "You just entered the military not too long ago. Don't tell me I encountered a top student." "Well, even if you ask me, I don't know the answer to this domain." Though this officer's face was evil, his mouth was foul, and his grasp of timing was terrible, he was still a magnanimous person. Luo Nan smiled at him, hoping to continue the training course as soon as possible. But the officer still asked, "Which workstation are you at?" Luo Nan nearly blurted out, "Are you done yet?" "No, it was 4 to 92. "Oh, that's not right." Luckily, he corrected himself in time and answered, 1 to 95. 1-95. I remember it was Chin Han. Luo Nan recalled for a moment. Lieutenant Go Yi had said this when he was assigning work. He said, "I heard that Officer Xian Zhu went to the front lines on a mission, so his workstation was transferred out." Oh my. The officer used his untreated arm to suddenly slap his thigh. "Good. Good job. Old Go really knows me." Luo Nan was startled. "You are." The officer's expression suddenly changed before he could say the name. His body trembled, and then he swung his arm with force. This time it was the one receiving treatment. The medical robot, which had been working diligently all this time, was overturned to the ground with a crash. Its motor was idling, and beads of blood were flung out from its operating arm. There was also a small blood-colored strip. This toy fell to the ground and continued to twitch. Chapter 9:19. Luo Nan could clearly see that this was a muscle fiber. Thankfully, the officer reacted quickly. Otherwise, the medical robot's debridement needle knife would have cut off an entire nerve bundle of the injured right arm. The officer, who didn't have a good temper to begin with, cursed when he suddenly received this injury. He swept his leg and kicked the idling robot far away. However, the wound had already been torn open a second time, and more blood gushed out. "Officer." Luo Nan displayed a bit of concern, but a portion of his attention was focused on the deeper parts of the wound. There was also the medical robot that was nearly scrapped. The emergency Model 5 Plus battlefield healing machine. It shouldn't have made this kind of mistake. It's nothing. My luck is bad. It's a vicious environment right now. Anything can happen. The officer displayed a coarse and indifferent attitude. His face, which was covered by metal prosthetics, recovered his smile. "I haven't even thanked you yet. You pushed me out of the fixed-point maintenance group. I don't need to play with these low-level machines every day. I can live for at least another 3 to 5 years." Luo Nan had already guessed this person's identity. He called out in a probing manner, "Officer Xian Zhu." "Yes. It's me." Officer Xian Zhu took the initiative to extend his hand. Luo Nan subconsciously thought that he was going to shake hands. But when he extended his hand, he discovered that Officer Xian Zhu was going to punch him. He hurriedly corrected himself and bumped his fingers together. Luckily, Xian Zhu didn't mind. In order to reduce the awkwardness, Luo Nan took the initiative to speak. "I heard Officer Go say that you went to the front lines. I didn't expect you to come back this quickly. How far is the front lines? Besides, how is that considered the front lines? There's no close combat. There's only long-range coverage. At most, it's just gambling on luck in a casino." Xian Zhu's and Go Ye's explanations were surprisingly similar. Perhaps veteran soldiers who had truly been to the front lines had this kind of thinking. Luo Nan saw that Officer Xian Zhu's arm injury had clearly worsened as he spoke. The area of his injury extended from his upper right arm all the way to the back of his shoulder blade. The wound was irregular. It seemed to have been forcefully torn by a blunt object. Perhaps there was also a bone problem. In any case, the medical robot had already mended and stitched up most of the wound. It was just about to be wrapped up. Who would have expected that such a thing would happen? Plus, Luo Nan had a faint feeling that the problem wasn't that simple. "Sir, I'll send you to the infirmary, it's meaningless. The medical module of this slime is rubbish, and it's a low-level operation in the base. It's better to use that little thing. F*CK, I trusted it so much, and it tricked me." Sergeant Xian Zhu cursed and stood up at the same time. He waved his hand to stop Luo Nan from helping him up. "Your time as a guard is precious. You don't need to worry about me. Just watch yourself. I'll go ponder over it." As he spoke, he walked towards the medical robot that had stopped working. From his tone, it seemed like he needed to repair it again. As expected of a repairman, he couldn't bear to see the machines malfunctioning. Luo Nan didn't listen to Xian Zhu. He went straight forward and said, "Officer, your current state is very bad." "Nonsense, do I need you to remind me? The nails on the bones were broken, and the nerves were severed. I had to forcibly reattach them." "No, don't be so clingy. I hate talkative fellows the most." Sergeant Xian Zhu's expression changed. His rough and wild temperament clearly came out. Luo Nan didn't know what to say, but Xian Zhu seemed to have thought of something. He waved his undamaged left hand. "Perfect. You're still in training. Leave 1 to 95 empty. Give me the authority. I'll go do a repair test. I'll take advantage of this time to solve the problem. It'll be the best of both worlds." Luo Nan thought for a bit when faced with Xian Zhu's oppressive gaze. He shook his head and refused. "Officer, I want to say that there should be a problem with the operation of your dynamo core. Otherwise, the emergency 5+ model battlefield healing machine will only stop and stagnate. It won't cause an error in operation." Xian Zhu was stunned. "You're going to teach me? I'm just guessing." Lieutenant Xing Zhan just said that when the dynamo core's carrier is slightly contaminated, the conduction of the neural electrical signals will cause disorder in a specific waveband. This will cause deviations in the precise control. More importantly, it will activate the contamination judgment of the existing smart devices, causing a double error to superimpose. Clearly, there was a problem with the emergency 5+ model battlefield healing machine's judgment just now. "Officer, you should have subconsciously made adjustments, forcefully using the dynamo core." The expression on Xian Zhu's fierce face was subtle. Luo Nan really did talk too much from his perspective, but there were some things in Luo Nan's words that stabbed at the pit of his stomach. In the end, it's a certain fellow's brain that's been fried. Suddenly, a hoarse voice cut in. The door to the military classroom had opened a bit earlier, and Lieutenant Go Yi glided in with the support of a single prosthetic arm. Xian Zhu stared at Luo Nan in the first instant. "You're snitching!" Luo Nan cried out in bafflement. "Let's not talk about your hoarse voice. The bug is just a little big. I wouldn't even know if there was a problem with the equipment inside. I might as well throw the position of lieutenant to you. You have the nerve to say that I have a hoarse voice." Xian Zhu cursed vaguely. He faced Lieutenant Go Yi and made a meaningless gesture with one hand. "And then? Are you going to shove me into the medical room? Come on, is there a difference? You might as well bring another emergency 5+ over." Lieutenant Go Yi laughed amiably. "Your luck isn't too good. I brought a total of 6 emergency 5+ units. Half of them have been brought to the front lines to provide support. There's also one that's malfunctioning and is currently being repaired. The other one is currently in use and won't be able to be adjusted for a while. Why don't you obediently lie down? I'll call a transport vehicle to send you back. Xian Zhu exploded when he heard this. Are you kidding me? If it's broken, then fix it. If you let a baffling malfunction go back in, you'll probably make people laugh to death. Give me the 1 to 95 and I'll fix it in a few minutes. Lieutenant Go Yi shook his head. It looks like there's even a problem with his auditory nerves. Luo Nan said it so clearly. You've been infected by the evil poison, old man. You need to go back and have the dynamo core replaced. Lie down. Your wound is still gurgling with blood. We'll give you emergency treatment. Xian Zhu spat. I said I could fix it myself. You don't want to lose face in front of the youngsters. The problem is that you've already lost face. Lieutenant Go Yi directly stabbed a knife into Xian Zhu's heart. You don't even know that you've been infected. You want a private who just joined the army a few days ago to point it out. If I were you, I'd stick my face to the floor. That would barely be considered magnanimous. F*CK me, Xian Zhu's Sky Abyss Kingdom cursing was roughly like this. Cursing was one thing, but this rough-tempered officer actually lay down very obediently. He even deliberately rubbed his face against the floor he had just stepped on. Is it like this? The corner of Luo Nan's mouth twitched. He was barely able to control himself. Lieutenant Go Yi turned his face at this time. Remember Officer Xian Zhu's appearance. I don't want you to laugh at him in your heart. Instead, you need to understand that you can be stubborn with a few words on the battlefield, but you need to be realistic in the end. This is the reason why he's been able to live until now. It would be better if he didn't say a few words. Go Yi, I'll XXUXX. Xian Zhu fiercely smashed his chin against the floor. His cursing entered a profound domain. Luo Nan began to be unable to understand it. Go Yi didn't care in the slightest. He just asked Luo Nan, how about it? Want to use him for practice? Chapter 920. Hey, what the hell are you doing? Can you have some basic trust in a newbie? The two officers and seniors cursed and chattered. Go Yi was in no hurry and Xian Zhu didn't actually jump up to refuse. Luo Nan entered his proper state, minding his own business. Though Go Yi didn't speak too clearly, as a maintenance worker, he was able to understand Go Ye's train of thought. In fact, this was also Xian Zhu's train of thought, the other machines weren't idle. No matter what was done, it could only fall onto the malfunctioning medical robot. So Luo Nan walked over after responding. He crouched in front of the Urgent 5+ battlefield healing machine that had no reaction at all. Fine granules flowed out from between his fingers. It was none other than the syncopator. This period of time was enough for Luo Nan to develop the habit of carrying a syncopator with him. He casually gave the machine on the ground a cut. Syncopator. Xian Zhu's attention was drawn. He didn't care about bickering with Go Yi anymore. He grimaced in pain as he adjusted his angle on the ground. His cheek stuck to the ground as he turned his head to look. How is it? Go Yi asked. It's rare to see someone use a syncopator to make a diagnosis, and to do it so skillfully. Did I ask you? Go Yi gave him a sidelong glance. His actions successfully made Xian Zhu's eyes glow with an ominous glint. But then he just bared his teeth and grunted twice. In the end, he couldn't help but raise his voice and directly ask Luo Nan, Kid, what's the result of the syncopation? Listening to Xian Zhu's words felt like taking a pulse. Of course, the Heavenly Yuan Empire probably didn't have such a thing as taking a pulse, but the meaning just so happened to match. Luo Nan answered truthfully, the mounted needle knife module was struck by an external force. There is a conduction failure. It can be repaired. The central chip was probably affected by the forceful control. It has already been burned. It needs to be replaced. Go Yi clicked his tongue, retribution. If you say you're infected, then so be it. Why the forceful control? The Urgent 5+ is equipped with a Faction 7 chip. It has 2 storage bases and has already been sent to the front lines. The replenishment hasn't arrived yet. Xian Zhu sneered, do you think I'm stupid? The Urgent 5 Plus was bragged when it left the factory. As long as it's within the range of the Jade Crystal Array, the Cloud Core can compensate with near zero delay. As long as it senses and conducts. The system isn't completely finished. Are you sure you can't walk after burning a few broken chips? The smile on Go Yeyuan's face widened, congratulations. You've been infected, but your brain is still fine. Do you have the blueprints? I'm talking about the configuration. When it comes to long-range functions, this is very important. The last sentence was directed at Luo Nan, and Luo Nan immediately responded, yes. Perhaps Luo Nan would need to flip through the concrete details of the mechanical structure of the equipment that the Earth Layer Patroller had been in his hands for the past few days. He would need to borrow the system to filter out the plans, but the configuration designs that were separated from the physical body of the equipment were imprinted in Luo Nan's memory. He could use them at any time without any hindrance. However, Luo Nan wasn't without problems. Reporting to the lieutenant. According to the treatment data, there are 2 indicators in the state of Sergeant Xian Zhu's dynamo core that have already exceeded the limits of the moderately polluted region. Moreover, it is interacting with a portion of the neurotransmitter conduction. It is not stable enough. According to the drill manual, this has already met the standards of wartime disposal, should we? Hiss. Xian Zhu sucked in a breath of cold air between his lips and teeth. On one hand, it was a reaction to Luo Nan's words. On the other hand, it was a reaction to the instantaneous change in mood. The abnormal pulsation of his nervous system formed an effect. He was speechless for a time. Go Yu was quite calm and collected. Oh, you want to mount the neurosurgery module, right? This is in stock. It will be delivered immediately. Warm up first. Try to guide the cloud core to control it from a distance. Examine it. Come up with a treatment plan first. Luo Nan obeyed Go Ye's orders. He responded with a grunt, and more syntome particles flowed down between his fingers. They switched to a working state one after another. They revolved around the paralyzed robot on the ground. Not a single one of them made any substantial contact with the robot. But after circling and adjusting a few times, it was as if several incorporeal ropes were woven in the air. The medical robot became a puppet that pulled the strings. It swayed crookedly as it adjusted its posture. It used the fine adjustments of the all-terrain tracks to stand up once more. Soon, this Emergency 5 Plus battlefield healing machine, which was a bit like a mini armored vehicle, started its self-examination program. Its internal sensing, conduction, and external function modules all made minute adjustments amidst the soft vibrations. The miniature repair probe hidden within the belly of the machine extended out. It wrapped around the already malfunctioning needle knife-mounted mechanical arm to carry out adjustments. The needle knife mechanical arm swayed left and right. It was a bit stiff at first, but its movements became smoother and smoother after a few seconds. Xian Zhu switched his chin to rest on the ground. He sighed with emotion, so the 12th equipment department isn't full of big mouths after all. The cloud core compensates quite quickly. Go Yi didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stared fixedly in that direction. The smile on his round face faded a bit. Only when the Emergency 5 Plus battlefield healing machine began to revolve in place and lock onto the direction of the target did he speak in a low voice. The problem is, I haven't approved the temporary compensation authority this toy requested from the Jade Crystal Array. Then hurry up and... Huh? Xian Zhu's chin movement was too large, and he suffered a backlash from the floor. He nearly bit his tongue, but he didn't care about this. He followed up with a question, the cloud core isn't supported. Is this a freaking manual operation? The smile on Go Ye's face reappeared, and it grew deeper. Illegal operation. Just a little bit more. Xian Zhu didn't understand what Go Ye meant for a time, but this didn't stop him from observing the medical robot's performance. Even though he already knew the root of the problem, in the eyes of an old maintenance worker, he was unable to distinguish the difference between the robot's movements and those of an intelligent program. That is, if the flying ants to the side were excluded. Could it be that I've encountered a genius of the precise control class? Then Xianzhu saw the healing robot, which was completely under Luo Nan's manual control. It had already locked onto Xianzhu as its target and was drawing closer to him. The tracks rolled over the ground with a series of faint sounds. The sounds passed through the floor, the chin, and the chest to penetrate the brain and disturb the heart. Stop! Xianzhu couldn't hold back from shouting. The medical robot completely synchronized with his voice and stopped advancing. Luo Nan cast a slightly puzzled gaze over. Clearly, he didn't understand Xianzhu's intentions. You're just going to operate it manually? Xianzhu only realized what was going on when the words left his mouth. He was actually a bit apprehensive, but he couldn't retract his words no matter what. He could only smash his chin against the floor again. Luo Nan grew more and more puzzled. He turned his head to look at Go Yi. Only Go Yi understood at this time that these two people's thoughts weren't on the same channel at all. But there was really no meaning in having him explain. So he simply urged his toes to tap the floor twice. The application has been approved. Prepare. An intense tremor suddenly arrived before his voice could fall. Chapter 921. Not to mention Go Yi and Xianzhu, even Luo Nan had trained himself to turn a deaf ear and a blind eye to similar vibrations and impacts. In the slightly shaky military classroom, Go Yi only paused for a moment before continuing, prepare to connect to the local equipment. The treatment plan needs to be prepared first. Luo Nan, the situation you mentioned needs to be added into the plan. There's no need to rush the operation. That's because you're not in a hurry. In his words, there was a reversal of logic. In short, no matter who spoke, he would refute. Go Yi didn't care at all. You can think of it as a symptom of your contamination. It's true that the front lines are allowed to deal with it urgently at the moment, but if it's not a situation that takes your life immediately, it's more appropriate to use specialized equipment at the back. After all, the internal growth of the dynamo core, one's life, one's future, and one's fate all depend on it. It's better to be cautious. Xianzhu chuckled coldly. As if you don't have a dynamo core. Go Yi supported himself on the ground with one leg. As if performing acrobatics, he shook his limbless, bald torso. I'm doing this to save my life. I'm fundamentally different from certain people who lack talent and confidence. Xianzhu's ferocious face turned green, so much so that the metal prosthetics sank into his flesh. At this moment, Luo Nan practically thought that he would jump up and give the poisonous tongue Go Yi a beating. But in the end, Xianzhu only covered his mouth and nose on the floor and ordered in a muffled voice, "What are you waiting for? Do you think my butt is sexy?" Luo Nan went, "Oh," but he didn't have the awareness of being a punching bag. He responded calmly, "It's already done. According to the medical plan, it's recommended that we perform a preset signal blocking technique on the spot to prevent the nervous system from becoming chaotic and further deteriorating. Then we return to the 2 hive and perform a reset of the new dynamo core. Minor adjustments have been made to the plan for external injuries. There are basically no changes." "What do you mean by going back to the second honeycomb?" "Maybe they'll kick me to the assembly line." Xianzhu was still using the floor to stifle his face, which corresponded to his emotions. Nothing he heard was pleasing to his ears, especially when another wave of tremors came from outside. The entire soil layer patroller was shaking more obviously, making him feel seasick as he lay on the floor. "You're not going back? Are you going to stay on the front lines and cause trouble for others?" As the superior officer, Go Yi was disinclined to pay attention to this sort of emotional reaction. He turned toward Luo Nan. "Let's begin. You must remember this. The sinful poison contamination is a contamination of the rules. For the infected, the rules have changed. Things that used to be taken for granted will completely change. For maintainers like us, let's not talk about anything else. The most terrifying thing is when you use the best methods from the drill manuals and experience to deal with the problem, but the mistake will come out of nowhere, and it will appear as if you're just occasionally unlucky. In fact, the demons were born from these mistakes, and then rapidly expanded. Xian Zhu laughed gloomily. Where's your poetry recitation? Isn't it shameful to do this? If the evil poison could be explained simply and clearly, I would have become a tenured professor at the Imperial University long ago. In the end, Go Yi couldn't take it anymore and retorted, Someone, do you want to paint yourself as a ghost, or do you want us to pull you back? You're not the ones who can pull me back. In the end, I still have to go back and torment myself. With your position and ability, if it weren't for today's show, if Colonel Xing Zhan were to glance at you from the corner of his eyes, I'd admit defeat. Xian Zhu choked. He wasn't angry, but he seemed to be a bit moved. Go Yi didn't bicker with him any longer. He just said to Luo Nan, the Cloud Core compensation plan has been synchronized. Don't leave any evidence behind when you operate. Xian Zhu wasn't satisfied. I'm not your exercise book, yes. I'm not. Yes, I'm Go Yi. The full maintenance team is currently performing a maintenance mission in the front extension of the main track. Xian Zhu, who had changed the channel once again, immediately shut his mouth and raised his head to look over. Go Yi went silent after his simple report, but it didn't last long. He ended the communication a few seconds later. The expression on his round face was the same as always. He only pursed his lips at Luo Nan, serve this master well. Hurry up and get him out of here. Xian Zhu wasn't annoyed at this time. He grinned, there's a mission. Go Yi really didn't pay attention to him this time. He slid back with his single leg and left without consulting anyone. Lieutenant. The one who opened his mouth to stop this time was actually Luo Nan. He didn't think through his words and just directly sent them out, my training time. Go Yi had already retreated outside the door. He was stunned for a moment before he laughed, remember. At the very least, I'll give you Sergeant Xian Zhu's share. Luo Nan's mind relaxed and he stood at attention in response. These bastards these days, this was the general meaning of Xian Zhu's words. But no matter how incisive the words were, they would always lose some of their flavor after being translated once. Curses were the same. Luo Nan wasn't very sensitive to this. Since Go Yi had promised him, he didn't think too much about it. He returned to his focused state and stared at the robot that was beginning to perform operations without even blinking. Actually, after the Cloud Core compensation began, the relay station would allocate a certain amount of computing resources to this machine through the network system. It was no different from when the device's chip was intact. Luo Nan didn't need to worry about looking after him anymore. He could be like Xian Zhu from before, minding his own business and participating in training and learning. No one would be able to say anything to him. However, Luo Nan was already used to finishing what he started on the level of configuration. Even though the work domain of the needle knife mechanical arm was quite different from what he was good at, he still hoped to be able to see a corresponding change in the configuration. In addition, according to the confirmed treatment plan, there was still a mounting module responsible for executing the signal blockage technique that hadn't come. Officer Go Yi had left in a hurry just now and forgot to mention this matter. Luo Nan was considering whether or not he should ask again. At this time, Xian Zhu, who was restitching the wound, began to pound the floor. This explosive temper. Huh? Motherf asterisk cur. Give me some anesthesia. Xian Zhu was able to laugh and talk as if nothing had happened when he directly used the knife. That was because he had used the dynamo core to block the nerve signal. Once the signal was cut off, the pain would be inconsequential. But now that the evil poison had been diagnosed, the dynamo core was as good as nothing. It had to be sealed. Xian Zhu was able to endure for 20 to 30 seconds without making a sound under the needle, thread, and blade. Luo Nan didn't know if he was a tough guy or if he was slow. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Luo Nan promptly apologized, but what was the use of apologizing now? Luo Nan saw that Xian Zhu's face was distorted. He needed to quickly block the transmission of pain. Drugs and the like wouldn't make it in time. In his desperation, Luo Nan simply waved his hand and tossed out a syncopator like scattering beans. It must be said that Luo Nan had a deep understanding of the structure of the human skeleton and its corresponding configuration. But when it came to specific targeted operations, Luo Nan was limited by his experience. He lacked experience when it came to small techniques like precise anesthesia. Luo Nan didn't have a choice, so he simply used the syncopator to analyze Xian Zhu's current state and make adjustments. Xian Zhu's forehead was covered in cold sweat from the pain. He watched as dozens of flying ants spiraled down. Some of them even stuck to his wounds. He couldn't help but be a bit stupefied. But the effects were good. He could faintly feel a bit of a unique interference force. He heard the buzzing of the flying ants, and the intense pain that nearly tore his shoulder blade apart, but it was like a dream. He suddenly woke up from it and the pain disappeared without a trace. The pain and the cold sweat from the stress reaction quickly subsided, but his curiosity rose. He stirred up his tongue, which he had just bitten open, and he spoke over and over again. "Oh, this is interesting. Your hand looks familiar to me. You used the syncopator to adjust the configuration and then used reverse interference, right? No wonder Go Yi was talking about you. Don't think that just because you have the skin of a syncopator, I can't see that you're violating the rules. Luo Nan. You're super daring. Strictly speaking, you're very restrained. Unfortunately, it's not that you're cautious. It's more like you're forcefully controlling from start to finish. Who taught you this?" "Lieutenant Go Yi." Luo Nan told the truth. "I knew it. He's the only one who studies these bizarre toys. He's a fan of the classical school. It's only because he's old and he's crippled that he's a bit quieter. His greatest joy right now is to teach you youngsters these meaningless things." Luo Nan frowned. He didn't want to listen to this kind of expression. He stiffly retorted, "I think it's pretty good. I like it a lot." Xian Zhu heard this and turned his face to the side. He sized up Luo Nan from top to bottom. Then he returned to his chin resting on the floor posture. "You like it? It's good that you like it. You're much cuter than those practical types who ask if it's useful or not. I also think it's very useful." Luo Nan didn't get the chance to say these words before Xian Zhu spoke again. "It has to be passed down. Go Yi loves to say things like this. He also says things like, I'm trapped in the Hangguang system right now, but I'll return to normal in the future. If I have some spare energy, I might as well do some preparatory work. I can't abandon normal things just because I'm living a shitty life right now." And so on and so forth. He hasn't said these words to you yet. He'll have to say them sooner or later. You can recite them first. You'll give him a pleasant surprise later. Xian Zhu laughed to himself. His laughter shook his chest, spreading to the wounds on his arm and shoulder. He was already anesthetized, so he didn't feel anything. However, he forced the robot to adjust the details of the operation. Only then would the robot not flip a second time. Luo Nan subconsciously pressed down with his hand, not letting Xian Zhu move recklessly. The door to the military classroom opened once more at this time. A multifunctional. It had been modified into a transport robot. Luo Nan saw the special mounting module for the emergency 5+ battlefield healing machine with a single glance. With this, the signal blocking technique wouldn't be a problem. As expected, Lieutenant Go Yi was very reliable. Luo Nan let out a sigh of relief. He signaled the transport robot to move closer. Clang! The sudden noise didn't come from the military classroom. It came from an unknown region within the Earth Layer Patroller. Before Luo Nan could distinguish it clearly, another wave of vibration came over. It was more intense than the previous two. It was far too intense. This wave of vibration had an extremely strong continuity. It didn't seem like the usual intentional and intermittent eruptions. It was more like the firecrackers on Earth. They crackled and crackled as they connected. Of course, This magnitude was more than 10 million times heavier. Even the repeated explosions overlapped with each other. They quickly blended into a sheet of pure impact. They passed through the conduction of air molecules to crush the Earth layer patroller. The floor of the military classroom where Luo Nan and Xian Zhu were located was already visibly slanting. The transport robot that was moving back nearly crashed into Luo Nan's chest. And after this great swaying, the entire Earth layer patroller seemed to be undulating and swaying amidst the waves of the sea. It looked like it would collapse at the slightest disagreement. Beep. All on-duty personnel of the full maintenance team, remain in your stations. Those who leave your stations must return within 1 minute. All maintenance activities must cease. The ship is about to enter a high-speed propulsion state. Chapter 922. What the hell was going on? At this very moment, similar thoughts probably flashed through the minds of the maintenance soldiers in the Earth patroller. However, in the military, they would not explain the so-called ins and outs to you. Luo Nan was stupefied for half a second, but Xian Zhu, who was lying on the floor, straightened his body with a whoosh the moment the command arrived. Unsurprisingly, the operation process was seriously disrupted. It was an emergency 5+ alarm. Xian Zhu completely ignored it. He just urged Luo Nan, hurry hurry hurry. If you don't want to be a sandwich, then go to your workstation. Luo Nan instinctively responded with a yes, but he saw that Xian Zhu was about to push away the needle knife robotic arm. Most of the suturing operation had already been completed, and all of his previous efforts would be wasted. Luo Nan reacted without thinking. He shouted, "Wait," and pushed Xian Zhu's hand away. Luo Nan didn't wait for Xian Zhu to respond. He stabilized his balance on the swaying floor, bent down, and exerted strength. He picked up the 30-kilogram robot. At the same time, he extended his leg and kicked the mounted neurosurgery module that the transport robot had just delivered. It was flung towards Xian Zhu. This set of operations flowed like clouds and water. It was done in one go, proving the practical value of the basic fighting techniques that Gym Master Xiao had taught Luo Nan. Xian Zhu's eyes were glued to Luo Nan's series of operations. He instinctively used his undamaged arm to catch the mounted module that was still in its packaging state. Then, he was urged by Luo Nan, hurry up. 1-95. Xian Zhu frowned, rookie, have you never read the drill manual? At times like this, non-station personnel need to gather in the command room. Though he said this, he allowed Luo Nan to push him. The two maintained a relative distance as they jogged outside. As an experienced veteran, Xian Zhu played the role of leading the way. The auxiliary AI did indeed have a direct route to the destination, but it would never tell Luo Nan how to find a suitable point of leverage within the bumpy and swaying Earth layer patroller. This way, Luo Nan would be able to maintain a fast speed and not lose his balance. As for the medical robot in Luo Nan's arms, it was worthy of being the most trusted emergency treatment tool of the Sky Abyss military for the past several decades. After a few seconds of humming and adjusting, he finally found the feeling again. While Xian Zhu ran and jumped, he continued with the unfinished surgery. As for the flaws that might result from this, who would care about it now? Right now, the virtual world of Luo Nan's left eye only had a route guide to the target location and a blood-red countdown timer marking the 1000th percentile. All of the basic interface layouts had disappeared. It was a field of emptiness, but it was clearly gestating an even more serious follow-up event. It was hard for Luo Nan's mind to turn to other thoughts after the initial instinctive reaction had passed. But before he could understand what was going on, Xian Zhu suddenly spoke from the side in front of him. Yes. Understood. Workstation 1-95, temporary team. Luo Nan was stunned for a moment. He was pulled into a temporary channel at nearly the same time. He heard Go Ye's warning to Xian Zhu. You've lost your major for now, but don't be a cripple. Xian Zhu spat, how dare you say that? There is another person. Luo Nan saw it as well. Liang Lu had just joined in the temporary channel. This was Go Ye's introduction. 2 rookies, 0 battlefield experience. Right now, they are under your command. The authority has been delegated to you. Right at this moment, an elevator already opened and waiting appeared before Luo Nan and Xianzhu's eyes. The two rushed in one after the other, and the carriage quickly descended. Xianzhu said a corny joke that was hard to understand in the temporary channel. Did I just plunge all the way to the bottom? Go, you didn't give any more private orders. Instead, he suddenly called out to Liang Lu, who had just been pulled over. Officer Xian. Luo Nan. Stay focused, little fellows. Xianzhu flaunted his seniority in a tone of voice. It was unknown what Liang Lu was thinking. In any case, Xianzhu didn't make another sound after saying this. Hopefully, he would get used to this sooner. Luo Nan's thoughts flashed, and the carriage door opened. Luo Nan's independent workstation appeared before his eyes. It was practically no different from workstation 4 to 92. Well, the situation with the two people hadn't changed. As the two people entered their workstations, this place entered a completely sealed state. The 1-minute countdown stopped. The virtual interface of his left eye entered a heart-palpitating state of complete emptiness. Luo Nan looked at Xianzhu. Officer, you sit. As he spoke, he placed the healing robot on the ground. Xianzhu cursed. He was limited by the length of the needle blade mechanical arm, so he had no choice but to sit cross-legged on the ground. He instantly became shorter than Luo Nan. The thoughts in Luo Nan's mind weren't that complicated. He just needed to free up his hands to inspect the concrete state of the workstation. First, he synchronized the data. There were no problems. Next, he checked the connection to the vertical collar dynamo core, signal conduction, and control. There were no problems either. There was also the maintenance mission. Luo Nan's figure swayed, and the vertical isolation cover in front of him suddenly made a pressing motion. It pressed down on his position, and the control panel in front of him was pushed forward. Luo Nan instinctively lowered his body to avoid a head-on collision. In the end, he sat down on the floor and was once again level with Xianzhu. Only now did Luo Nan remember that he had seen a similar situation in his previous simulation. The Earth Layer Patroller was about to transform. It transformed from a maintenance mode to a high-speed propulsion mode. The internal transformation of the workstation was roughly like this. The upper and lower space was compressed, but the deeper space was slightly adjusted and enlarged. The overall space was compressed by at least half. There was already one more person and one more machine, so the space became even narrower. And because the isolation cover pressed down, the light from the outside world was completely cut off. The entire workstation shrunk to the abdomen of the large bug. The illumination was a bit dim, making the space feel even more cramped. Luo Nan and Xianzhu squeezed together. The healing robot could only be placed on their knees. Since their positions weren't right, the treatment could only be paused. The smell of blood from the open wound pervaded the narrow space. Luo Nan didn't think much of it. He just recalled the contents of the one and only drill, fumbling with the control mode that had already changed. Oh, it seemed like something was missing. Looking for a protective ring? Xianzhu chuckled twice. There should be a protective ring following us at this time, but a certain godly operator brought in a rapid 5+. It just so happens that we can experience the thrill of racing without any protection. We're just missing tactical mobility. Luo Nan let out an "oh" in response. Xianzhu spat, rookie recruit. You can't be saved. Though Xianzhu said this, the veteran Xianzhu still pulled out 2 sets of magnetic ribbons from the narrow space. This was a relatively primitive manual fixing device. It was a backup safety measure in the event of a malfunction of the workstation protective ring. Under Xianzhu's guidance, Luo Nan connected the ribbons to a few hidden anchors on the combat uniform, completing the most basic of defenses. At the same time, Xianzhu contacted Liang Lu through the temporary channel. Share your status, rookie. You need to show the value of enlisting half a year earlier. Liang Lu. Yes. In any case, Luo Nan and Liang Lu, these two recruits who had just experienced battle, completed everything they needed to do during the transformation period of the Earth Layer Patroller under Xian Zhu's rough supervision. Luo Nan even had a bit of time to find the control command for the panoramic simulation. The large bug buzzed as it started to accelerate, and the scene of the outside was reflected once more. He saw the dense mass of self-propelled machines below the abdomen of the robot. They seemed to never decrease in number. They were like wheat fields that had been struck by a storm under the impact of the incessant vibrations. Large swathes of machines collapsed to the point of being deformed. It was unknown how much work had been completed or nearly completed, but it had been reduced to zero. This could be considered a small sigh from a rookie maintenance soldier. Xian Zhu didn't have this sort of emotion. He just swept a glance and reminded Luo Nan, mission. Look at the mission in front of you. Luo Nan's left eye's virtual interface was synchronized with his words. A new scene jumped out on the walls of the enclosed cabin that had panoramic simulation activated. The two were completely the same. An animated demonstration of a long and narrow crevice appeared in the center of the area. The marked information was, Perpetual, Broken Rock, Construction, Blueprint Number, GI, 077. Then there was the shrinking and expanding surrounding area as well as the real-time status. Luo Nan had the most complete architectural blueprint of the relay station stored in his mind. He was able to quickly discern that the location was below the frontline blocking position. It could be considered the outermost territory of the base. Xian Zhu cursed vaguely, infrastructure repairs during wartime. This small bug won't be able to fill it even if I stuffed 10 more of it. The Earth Layer Patroller was originally known as the large bug, but it suddenly became small. But there wasn't a single problem with Xian Zhu's description. Out of the series of maintenance missions in the base, the one with the greatest difficulty and the highest risk factor was undoubtedly the maintenance of infrastructure. The infrastructure facilities of the base possessed the dual attributes of bearing and defense. They were certainly the most sturdy materials and the most reliable designs. It was fine if they didn't have any problems. But if something did happen, it meant that there was a huge problem with the defense system. The effect on other areas and the reaction from other areas were enough to make one's head swell. In terms of maintenance itself, many materials were used to repair it. There were many variables, and it took a long time. More importantly, the enemy wasn't a fool. How could they give you the chance to repair it calmly? Luo Nan pursed his lips as he stared at the mission icon. His eyes focused. How could it be broken? If this place was broken, wouldn't that mean that the space-time barrier, return? Xian Zhu smacked the back of Luo Nan's head with his palm. This time, he was really ruthless. Even the surrounding vertical collar dynamo cores had a moment of signal chaos. Luo Nan turned his head in shock, but he saw Xian Zhu staring at him. A layer of dense white light suffused Xian Zhu's fierce face. Xian Zhu looked at Luo Nan, but he also looked at Liang Lu. Listen to my advice. Don't bring your brain. Huh? Right now, the ones whose brains are going to explode are logistics, Xingzhan, Hui, Tang, Yan, and the other knights. As frontline maintenance personnel, all you need to do is work properly. You guys can't seal off the holes in your brains. You want to be saviors, but I don't want to be a military judge. Beep. The notification sounded once more. The Earth Layer Patroller was clearly still moving forward. At most, it was slowing down. The workstation space had already begun to deform and reset. As the panoramic simulation warped and switched, Luo Nan saw the thick and heavy steel barrier in front of him. There was a thick crack that ran straight down. Luo Nan didn't know if it was an illusion of light, but the depths of the crack seemed to be filled and flowing with the light of fire. Chapter 923. After the beep, Lieutenant Goyi issued an order through the broadcast, everyone, pay attention. You are about to enter an area of abnormal rules. Don your armor and execute a type of formation. Unarmored personnel are forbidden from being exposed to all non-enclosed areas. The broadcast was still ongoing. A flat, box-shaped mechanical construct rose from the lower part of the workstation, which was gradually deformed and reset. It slid to the side of Luo Nan's feet, who was still held in place by the magnetic belt. A slight ringing sound rang out behind Luo Nan's ear, echoing with the toy from a distance. This was proof of his status and authority. The mechanical construct suddenly deformed. The main material was clearly cold metal, but under the disassembly and assembly of complex and precise parts, it was like a sticky living thing that clung to Luo Nan's leg. It quickly spread to his waist and abdomen. The magnetic belt automatically unraveled, giving space to this mechanical construct. In another breath of time, this exoskeleton armor covered Luo Nan's entire body. It connected with his external vertical collar dynamo core. His breathing automatically entered the life support module and coordinated with the external energy furnace. Every time Luo Nan breathed, the armor seemed to expand and contract. It was as if the several dozen kilograms of metal had the same pulse. Technician's armor is a classic 7th edition. The attack and defense modules exist for the sake of maintaining its functionality. It's a typical example of a partner being happier than the user. Xian Zhu gave a timely explanation from the side. As for Luo Nan, there were no changes at all. Don't doubt it. The so-called unarmored personnel is talking about me and himself. Xian Zhu pointed at the operation that was still ongoing on his back. Needless to say, there was still the infected endogenous dynamo core that was bound to his nervous system. Under these circumstances, it might be safer for him to be an unarmored personnel. The workstation space had already been restored as they spoke. The slight tilt didn't affect Luo Nan at all. Luo Nan naturally stood up. The all-encompassing metal visor automatically enhanced with panoramic simulation. It transformed the light signals of the outside world into a form that people were accustomed to seeing. But it also marked a deeper level of analytical data. Therefore, Luo Nan saw and measured the size of the crack that was rapidly approaching before his eyes. In the end, Luo Nan was able to see it. The infrastructure module labeled Gen 077 was created through a microscopic biological community similar to polyps. It was fed with energy on a large scale. It rapidly multiplied, guided, dyed, metallized, and shaped. Its vertical height was more than 140 meters, and it was deeply embedded in the rock layer. Its width was more than 200 meters, and its thickness was a jaw-dropping 4 kilometers. In other words, this was an artificially bred mountain. Since it had been fed since it was young, it was possible to design it before it was constructed. During the construction, special guidance technology could be used to set up spaces and channels inside the mountain. Of course, what was more important was the required structure and energy pathways. The structure of the relay station's space-time fortress was closely related to these infrastructure modules, and they complemented each other. Just looking at such a colossus was enough to make one feel dejected. But now, an astonishing fissure was torn from the bottom all the way to the top, and it was from the outside to the inside. It pierced through the obstruction of light, allowing this terrifying scar to appear before Luo Nan's eyes. The Soil Patrol was a medium-sized maintenance platform. Even though it had shrunk after its transformation, it could still fit dozens of people. It was at least the size of a minibus. However, if such a platform were to be filled, it would barely be able to fill the crack at the bottom. Luo Nan immediately understood the meaning behind Xian Zhu's words. Such an enormous project was absolutely not something that could be solved by a dozen or so maintenance soldiers. But here came the question, how did the fissure happen? Even though Xian Zhu had warned him beforehand, Luo Nan couldn't help but think about it. The new space-time fortress design was his work in the logic of the Innerverse simulator. Luo Nan's previous self-righteous design had already brought about a major and negative influence to the relay station. Now, even the most basic defensive function had a problem. Before Luo Nan could finish his thought, the Soil Patrol had already recovered to its working state. After a limited deceleration, it charged into the depths of the fissure. The number of photons passing through the isolation shield instantly decreased by several magnitudes, but it was still enough for illumination. As for the most eye-catching part, it came from the long trail of fiery light in front of Luo Nan's eyes. But at the same time, the two sides of the fissure flickered with specks of light. Some of them looked more like the cross-section of an electrical circuit. Luo Nan could even see lightning piercing through the air to connect to the two sides of the fissure. It was like a lotus root was broken and the thread was still connected. The soil patrol pierced through these leaping bolts of lightning. Luo Nan narrowed his eyes behind his visor as he looked at these things. If he wasn't mistaken, these were all energy nodes embedded in the configuration. Even though a considerable portion of them had already been destroyed, the ones that still existed were still attempting to reassemble and restore their preset functional structure. So direct and efficient. Forcefully cleaved open. Luo Nan and Xian Zhu's words rang out at practically the same time. However, Xian Zhu didn't have his visor to cover his words. His tone was even clearer. This is the work of a senior lord. With another attack like this, all of us will turn to dust. Cleave open. This level of offensive power. You must be joking. Oh. Luo Nan couldn't help but glance back. Who was the one who said not to use their brains just now? Liang Lu sent a message in the temporary team's internal channel at this time. He wasn't very confident, but he still expressed his own opinion, the line of fire ahead, and this sort of laceration. Is it the Hellfire Tyrant? Fine. Another person who used their brains. Luo Nan used the AI to inquire about the Hellfire Tyrant's information. But then, a set of coordinates was sent out in the temporary channel. Soon, it combined with the overall scene of the animation demonstration to mark out the directly visible area. The animation demonstration had already made it clear that the crack extended all the way to the outside of the relay station base. It formed a perfectly straight canyon tunnel that was 1,400 meters long. The area in front of the tunnel bore the heaviest force, approximately 400 meters. It was completely covered in flames, and it was precisely where Luo Nan and the others saw the fiery streak of sky. The newly set coordinates were behind the flames, approximately 300 meters away from the mouth of the crack. Set up a temporary blocking position at the coordinates. The specific standard requirements for the position came after the brief order. Luo Nangang swept his eyes over. The distance between the Earth City patroller and the fiery streak of sky was practically non-existent. Only at this distance did he discover that the flames on the other side were still endlessly extending forward. Buzz! The soil patrol truly began to break, but the kinetic energy of its forward charge still drove it to break through the barrier of flames ahead. The soil patrol's head fell down towards the bottom region of the crack. Chapter 924. Prepare for impact. Lieutenant Goyi issued another command. Luo Nan, who was already wearing the exoskeleton armor, had over 10 methods to easily stabilize his body. He just turned his head to glance and saw that Xian Zhu was still held in place by magnetic belts. He relaxed and cast his gaze outside once more. It was at this time that he heard Xian Zhu laugh. This is the best viewing platform. Luo Nan didn't understand. His mind was already attracted by the leaping flames in the outside world. Even with the 2 layers of filtering from the metal visor and the isolation cover, the high-energy jet that gushed and flowed outside was still extremely eye-catching. Of course, this was due to the deep data analysis of the panoramic simulation system, which allocated large amounts of computing power to this phenomenon. Right now, the 11 maintenance soldiers on the Earth Layer Patroller had already constructed a standard array. From Luo Nan's perspective, this was the complete or upgraded version of the formatted space constructed by the burners back on Earth. But at the same time, it was a weakened version on the mental plane. The 11 people in the array were interconnected with each other's energies. Even though they were more conservative in their use on the mental plane, they were able to closely coordinate and form a joint force with the support of the same system. Luo Nan, who had a relatively high level of cultivation in the mental side, was able to sense how strands of his soul strength were divided, converging into the tight structure of the array, and how it was used in an orderly manner. He had a similar experience when he was partnered with Liang Lu before, but that 2-person structure was far too simple. It was far inferior to the precision and standard he was seeing now. What's more, the flames were soaring and the high temperature of the external environment was 1,000 times more complicated and intense than the light pollution of the evil poison. The different operational rules inside and outside interfered and collided on the surface of contact. Even though Luo Nan's mental senses were severely restricted, he was still able to sense more valuable information. So much so that he nearly believed that the command issued by Lieutenant Go Yi to prepare for impact was issued on this level. Half a second later, the violent collision corrected the direction of Luo Nan's thoughts. The Earth Layer Patroller, after having a limited deceleration, still fiercely smashed into the burning ground of the area of fire at a speed of at least 150 km per hour. Arthropod number 1, which Luo Nan was on, and Arthropod number 6, which was side by side, were located at the very front of the Soil Patroller's 3 sets of arthropod limbs. During the transformation and repositioning process, Arthropod number 1 just so happened to be in a forward extending state. It was like the arms of a diver being extended forward. It was the first of all the modular parts of the Soil Patroller to make contact with the fiery ground. Luo Nan would never have imagined such a scene a few seconds ago. He looked at the flames pouncing on his face from outside the barrier and the ground that looked as solid as steel. There was an instant when the speed and amplitude of his heartbeat definitely exceeded the normal range. But Luo Nan was just a hair too late. He was able to capture the highly coordinated configuration combination of the standard array, the Earth Layer Patroller, and the materials of the ground. He subconsciously said, "Oh." It was hard to tell if he was surprised, frightened, or pleasantly surprised. The violent impact reverberated back, and Luo Nan's armored figure pounced forward under the effect of inertia. He was just about to slam into the control desk when the standard array and the Earth Patroller's anti-collision program activated at the same time. Luo Nan's body seemed to have been electrified amidst the buzzing and vibrating sounds. His body felt numb from head to toe, but the impact force was enough to cause fatal damage to his internal organs when he slammed into the barrier. But it was dissolved layer by the electrified vibrations. Aside from a bit of dizziness and a bit of sweat, there were no other effects. The force that was impossible to dispel was derived from the standard array through the highly efficient impact conduction system. It extended into the mechanical structure of the Earth Patroller, and then it was derived from the outer armor. It formed a powerful howling whirlwind amidst the flames and the collapsed building materials behind the ship, which was still rapidly sliding and tearing the ground apart. It was an astonishing power. From Luo Nan's perspective, this set of hardcore standard array application technique of exerting force and dispelling force was truly astonishing. "Oh, not bad. Your legs aren't weak. You can stand firm. Just this alone will make the vast majority of people eat dust behind your heels." Xian Zhu still had the leisure to praise Luo Nan. It was just that his voice was a bit hoarse after speaking for a bit longer. He even coughed twice. It was clear that the impact of the hard landing just now was too much for him, who wasn't wearing armor. Luo Nan grinned. He didn't know why, but he was sweating quite a bit. Soon, a thin layer of sweat seeped through his body, and it was sucked dry by the lining of his combat uniform. He was as refreshing as ever, just a bit floaty. It couldn't be that he was so shocked that his legs went weak, right? Luo Nan was embarrassed to respond to Xian Zhu's reaction. He could only shut his mouth. He wanted to turn his head to look at Xian Zhu's situation, but Lieutenant Go Yi had already issued an order. "Hurry, hurry, hurry. Install the docking module according to the temporary group. You have a quarter of an hour." Lieutenant Go Yi was obviously talking about Heaven Abyss time. Converted to Earth's standard time, it was only about 8 minutes. Luo Nan had never experienced such a battle before. He was a bit stupefied for a time. He didn't know where to start. At this time, Luo Nan could see Go Ye's good intentions in having Xian Zhu join their group. As a veteran maintenance officer, Xian Zhu's experience in this area was explosively rich. His mouth was reckless in making comments, but there was no lack of work that needed to be done. While Lieutenant Go Yi was urging them once more, he had already refined the tasks assigned to their group a step further and assigned them to Luo Nan and Liang Lu. number 1 and number 4. Just right, one in front and one in the back. Don't panic. It's just digging earth and building a frame. The Earth Layer Patroller finally came to a stop after sliding for 70 to 80 meters. It had already torn a long, perfectly straight scar in the foundational material that was both metal and cement on the ground. However, its final stopping point was precisely the pre-constructed area of the blocking position, which was around 300 meters away from the front lines. It displayed the first-rate control skills of its operator. Right now, the Earth Layer Patroller was like a mole cricket half sticking out of the ground from Luo Nan's perspective. Its 6 limbs, front and back, left and right, were all plucking at the layer of earth. It endlessly expanded and flattened the foundation of the area where the ship was located. Of course, this sort of operation ultimately relied on automatic control. Luo Nan and Liang Lu were able to free up their hands after the earliest setup. They accepted Xian Zhu's assignment and continuously took out all sorts of spare parts stored within the Earth Layer Patroller in between excavating the earth. They hoisted them to various designated areas. Luo Nan was inexplicably doing the work of excavating and hoisting, but he wasn't annoyed. This was because he was quite interested in the Earth Layer Patroller, the standard array, and the corresponding relationship between the configuration of the foundational modules used by the two. This sort of method wasn't like the space-to-point permeation technique that Liang Lu spoke of. It was more like a more pure problem of configuration. Though the Earth Layer Patroller unceremoniously cut open a portion of the surface of the tunnel area, the relationship between the two grew more and more intimate. As the blocking position was built, the two worked hard to become one. Luo Nan and the others, who were the controllers, used the standard array to play a clear role in catalysis. Because of this, the Earth Layer Patroller that plunged headfirst into the fiery zone was the same as connecting to the half-dead spacetime defense configuration nodes within the foundational modules of the foundational modules in the fire-type law environment, bringing them to life. It was also like building a high-powered jammer and signal tower. It made the surrounding area of abnormal rules become less unified and coordinated. At the very least, the stability and sustainability of the fiery zone were clearly a bit chaotic in the surrounding area where the Earth Layer Patroller sat. Although it was said to be building a blocking position, it was actually doing the preparatory work for an overall repair. The commander in the back had a very clear mind. Luo Nan had a deeper understanding of the mission objectives assigned to him by Go Yi and Xian Zhu. Under the premise of this understanding, he could be considered to know the how and why of the mission objectives. Slowly, the work on Luo Nan's hand began to speed up. It started around 3 minutes later and he no longer needed Xian Zhu to break it down in detail. Luo Nan knew what he needed to do when Go Yi made the arrangements. Later on, he could even make some preparations in advance. The work on hand grew smoother and smoother. Correspondingly, the space for his thinking grew more and more ample. The space for divergence grew larger and larger. His train of thought gradually flew away. Unfortunately, Luo Nan could only let his train of thought fly for now. The outside world was a special law environment characterized by flames. Under the premise of standard operation, it was still very hard to grasp the deeper details, even with the amplification of the standard array. If this was on Earth, Luo Nan would certainly have just brushed through a wave of pure sensing. But in the current scene, he needed to use a certain physical medium to accomplish this point. Luo Nan really wanted to use a syncopator to cut it. If I were you, I definitely wouldn't mess around. Xian Zhu's words entered Luo Nan's ears in a timely manner. Luo Nan was a bit surprised. Xian Zhu certainly couldn't see the changes in Luo Nan's expression through the metal visor, but Xian Zhu still had an expression that said, "I knew you wouldn't be peaceful." Ah! Only now did Luo Nan discover that there were already a few flying ants circling around his hand. Even he himself didn't know when they were released. That big rookie over there. His brain isn't listening, but his knowledge is enough. The Hellfire Tyrant. Speaking of which, youngsters these days have been raised too well in the Jade Crystal Array. Do they have no concept of the might of the sovereign domain? No, I'm just... Ah, it really is the Hellfire Tyrant? Luo Nan wasn't the only one who quickly got on the right track. Liang Lu, who had a solid foundation in the domains of configuration and creation, had already adapted to the work on hand. He was able to divert his attention to participate in the discussion. Xian Zhu grinned. He grabbed the needle-knife mechanical arm that had just left his shoulder after completing the treatment. He performed a quick disassembly before smashing it towards Luo Nan's face. If you want to die, then King Chop. I won't have to waste time collecting your corpse. You better remember the following external work. Chapter 925. Common name, Hellfire Tyrant. Type, Outworld species. Danger level, Calamity. Uncontrollable restlessness. Born in an extremely harsh special spacetime environment. Once it enters the local spacetime, it will rapidly decline. It has no concept of friend or foe. It must constantly kill and seize life force rich in restless emotions in order to maintain its survival. Only after seizing enough life force and completing a temporary transformation will it stop killing and enter the nearest star to use fusion energy to leave. Output, Hellfire Gray Crystal, etc. Case study. Note, any Hellfire Tyrant that enters the local spacetime at its peak is undoubtedly at the Great Sovereign level. It possesses the most top-notch explosive lethality of its level. The auxiliary AI displayed the basic information regarding the Hellfire Tyrant in the virtual world. The last paragraph was highlighted in bold and highlighted in red as a reminder. Was this giving him, the designer of the new version of the Spacetime Fortress, some face? It was reasonable that the Spacetime Fortress was unable to withstand the most tyrannical eruption of a powerhouse whose concept was unclear for the time being. What the hell? The only thing that was clear right now was why the opponent didn't strike while the iron was hot after the world-shaking first strike and expand the results of the battle. It wasn't that he didn't want to, it was that he couldn't. The stream of flames that remained within the fissure tunnel was most likely the embers of the Hellfire Tyrant's most powerful level of power that had appeared out of nowhere. Luo Nan grinned. The sound of the needle blade mechanical arms smashing against his visor still seemed to reverberate in his ears. Officer Xian Zhu was truly angry at that moment. It was for no other reason than that Luo Nan dared to stroke the tiger's whiskers of a great sovereign-level outworld species. Luo Nan attempted to use the syncopator to touch the deeper source of power in the extremely dangerous environment of abnormal laws. If Luo Nan really did it, he wouldn't be the only one who would suffer the backlash. Everyone who had formed the standard array with him would. Then, in this game scene, Luo Nan would likely be selected as a key casualty example of the Heavenly Yuan Empire's military security training this year under the name Luo XX. His name would be widely spread throughout the entire concealed light galaxy. Luo Nan knew that he had nearly done something stupid, but it was hard for him to defend himself. He could only borrow Go Ye's orders to do external work and leave his workstation with his tail between his legs. He buried his head in his work, no longer searching for those fantastical and wonderful thoughts, the source of the disaster. Of course, he would have to run 30 meters away to find the remnants of the Hellfire Tyrant's flames even if he wanted to cut it once. Before that, he, who had disobeyed orders and left his post, would have been killed by the military judge. However, there was something strange. Hey! Luo Nan. Don't get distracted. Ah, okay. Luo Nan put on his armor and left the sealed area after the external assignment was issued. He began to deal with more complicated matters, and his partner returned to the beginning. At that moment, Liang Lu was also fully clad in armor. With the augmentation of the exoskeleton armor, his figure grew to 2.4 meters tall. His visor was cold and awe-inspiring, making him look much more ferocious. However, his voice didn't change. Don't worry, I've already explained it to Sergeant Xian Zhu. You are the kind of person who has sacrificed your common sense. Thank you. Sergeant Xian Zhu's violent temper is famous in the logistics department. He doesn't have a family and has always stayed in the army. His temperament is a bit eccentric, and he speaks frankly, but his heart really isn't bad. Don't take it to heart. How could I? Luo Nan absolutely wouldn't blame others for his own stupidity. What was troubling him right now wasn't his relationship with Xian Zhu. Instead, it was the noise. Luo Nan decided not to investigate the abnormal law environment of the fiery zone any further. He did his best not to think about it. But he didn't know why, but the gush of burning flames always hovered in his mind, faintly discernible. Plus, he would feel an inexplicable sense of dizziness whenever his gaze lingered on the fiery zone in the distance. He hated the faintly discernible noise even more. It lingered and reverberated in his ears. Could this be the backlash of the Hellfire Tyrant's control over the law? But I haven't cut it yet. Luo Nan couldn't understand. In comparison, the work at hand was far too clear and tight. According to Luo Nan's familiarity with Earth time, approximately 6 to 7 minutes had passed since Lieutenant Goyi issued the order to construct the blocking position. The time limit of the order was about to arrive, and an extremely clear outline of the blocking position had already appeared. Just like the previous design, it was a soil patroller maintenance platform that was sitting on the beach as the cornerstone. It was highly compatible with the surrounding infrastructure modules. Like building blocks, it was a basic component that had been added. It was just that the component was a bit larger. If one were to take a picture of the fissure tunnel 6 minutes ago and the current scene, one would be able to see the fissure had been forcefully torn open at a location 300 meters from the front of the tunnel. The lower region of the fissure had been sealed up once again. The height was approximately 20 meters, and it could already be considered a tall wall. The materials used to build the infrastructure module were the plate builder Zerg. Most of the energy reserves of the Earth layer patroller were poured into it and connected to the nodes of the spacetime fortress, forming a relatively dense energy path. Only then was it finally catalyzed. Within 6 minutes, the tall and sturdy city was completed in one go. There were many functional areas within the fortress that took shape as a single entity. The defense troops that followed set up polarizing shields, close-range defense cannons, beam weapons, and so on. They transformed the fortress into a rather large blocking position. Perhaps it was more appropriate to call it a fortress. There weren't just a few maintenance soldiers in the fortress right now. During the construction process of a few minutes, 3 squads of defense troops were ordered to come over to provide support. There were also maintenance, medical, and other special troops that arrived one after another. In addition, a portion of the squads that had retreated from the intense battle at the front lines were also resting and breathing here. They were also temporarily reorganized according to the needs. All sorts of officers and soldiers were stationed here. Over 70 people had already been arranged to stay here. The highest commander of the blocking position had already been replaced by Field Officer Meng Fan, who had just retreated from the front lines. Meng Fan had injuries on his body and was currently receiving treatment, but his thoughts were clear. Though he had taken over at the last minute, he still arranged everything neatly and orderly based on the foundation established by Lieutenant Go Yi. This was especially true for the coordinated operation of the standard array. Under a relatively complex environment of rules, an outstanding commander who had experienced 100 battles could produce an enormous positive effect. There were over 70 people in the position. Admittedly, the number of people wasn't all that eye-catching when compared to the front lines of the battlefield at the front lines of the tunnel. There was no lack of elite NCOs and lieutenants among them. The dense, tight, and never-ending power structure gave people ample support. It was as if everyone's energy was inexhaustible and inexhaustible. In addition, they were successfully combined with the configuration environment of the space-time barrier. Under the coordination of the inside and the outside, some work was pushed forward smoothly. Luo Nan, who was carrying out external work, had the most direct feeling. Right now, Luo Nan was responsible for debugging the energy conversion module at the front lines of the position. According to the relevant drill manual, the dozen or so connectors of the module had to be tested uniformly. These connectors were interconnected. If a single error exceeded the standard, the entire test would have to be redone. In the past, this sort of work was handed over to the experienced and steady old maintenance personnel to do. Luo Nan didn't even have the qualifications to do this. But now, Under the deployment of Lieutenant Commander Meng Fan, over half of the elite maintenance officers of their full maintenance team had been dispatched to the front lines to carry out battlefield repairs and support the tense battle situation. Most of the work on this side was left to the two rookies, Liang Lu and Luo Nan. Luo Nan had made up his mind to study and research deeply. But when he really got started, he discovered that the complex module debugging work didn't live up to its name. He didn't need to calculate and adjust these multi-headed modules at all. It was as if they had their own magnetic suction force. As long as the approximate position was correct, he just needed to place them in that direction, and they would automatically find their position. They would connect with each other precisely without any mistakes. At this stage, the docking coordination between the array and the environment configuration has already reached the point where it has its own rules. It doesn't exceed the rules. The dead and the living, the tangible and intangible. They can actually be fused to this degree. On the other hand, the Inferno Tyrant was able to forcefully tear a large hole in this highly fused and coordinated virtual fort. Just how powerful was the Inferno Tyrant when it was at its peak? TSK. How did it get to the top again? Luo Nan shook his head and sent the debugging results back. He received the approval of Xian Zhu and Go Yi. At the same time, a new mission was sent over. Install a Frozen Life Transfer and Maintenance Module on Weiji 06. Frozen Life? Luo Nan didn't understand what Frozen Life meant, so he searched for information. At this moment, Liang Lu, who was next to him, took in a breath of cold air first. Hiss. The transport of the critically ill is done here. The fissure tunnel had been forcefully torn open under extremely unexpected circumstances. It was admittedly a shortcut that led directly to the interior of the relay station base, but it wasn't on the planned route. Naturally, there was a special shortcut for transporting the wounded. Well, this wasn't the first time. Meng Fan and the other frontline troops were stationed here, and more details of the situation were transmitted back. According to the current understanding of the situation, a portion of the front lines had collapsed due to the sudden appearance and attack of the Inferno Tyrant. The minions of the magnetic mica jellyfish took advantage of the situation to press forward. They took advantage of the distortion and damage of the space-time barrier to break into the core region of the front lines. Sir Shi Yuan, who was commanding the front lines, reacted quickly and decisively. He used the configuration design of the front lines and the support of the standard array to forcefully push his cultivation to the level of a senior monarch in a short amount of time. He resisted the wanton slaughter of the Inferno Tyrant and waited for the enemy's strength to decline. Of course, this had enormous repercussions. Aside from the effects Sir Shi Yuan himself had suffered, the front lines were also affected by the aftermath of the confrontation between the strong, forming a state of chaos. Anything could happen in chaos.